Welcome to Mr. Nightbleed, a place where true horror lives in every shadow. The stories you're about to hear are real, shared by those who lived through the terror. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and prepare yourself. Because once the night begins, there's no escaping the fear. The first time I smelled him, I thought it was the ocean. I know that sounds dumb. You spend enough time on a ship and the air itself gets a taste to it. Wet salt, something metallic if you're close to the hull where spray dries and leaves a film. But this had a sharper edge, like old coins warmed up in your fist. I was on deck with my girlfriend Naomi, leaning against the railing and taking pictures of the water churning in the wake. Miami was a string of Christmas lights behind us. The ship had slipped out past the channel and into dark, open water. People were still excited and wandering around in sandals, talking too loud, becoming friends they'd forget by morning. We booked the cruise as a cheap reset. 3 nights. Miami to Nassau and back. I was one of those people who rolled their eyes at cruises until we actually stepped on and got hit with the air conditioning and the noise and the smell of every buffet line on earth mashed into one. Naomi wanted a tan. I wanted to sleep and maybe read. The ship was newer, all chrome and blue lights at night. Every surface had a place to rest your drink, which told you everything about the vibe. The midnight buffet was our downfall. That's the phrase Naomi used later, when she could. Laugh about it for 5 seconds out of every day. If you've never done one, picture a food court in a mall that someone decided to cram full of people at 1 in the morning, and then set on a moving platform. Kids with plates piled high with nachos. Men in polos pretending they don't eat. Dessert and then going back for 3. Women in sundresses doing that half shiver because the air conditioning is insane. It was silly and fun in the way only a bunch of overtired strangers can be. We were halfway through a plate of midnight tacos when the middle-aged couple sat next to us. He was one of those guys who look retired even if they're not. Tanny. Lines from a watch, white eyebrows. She had a floral dress and the kind of gold hoop earrings that catch every light. He introduced himself as Vic, and she was Marla. Houston teachers, finally taking the trip they kept putting off. They asked if we had any port tips, and Naomi pulled out a note on her phone with a list like she was suddenly the captain. It was easy to talk to them. You know how sometimes on a trip you glom onto another couple because you happen to laugh at the same dumb thing? They were our trip couple. We clinked paper coffee cups. We joked about the guy wandering around with a bandaged knee saying he won't let it slow him down, like cruises are where people go to pretend to be their younger selves without their knees. I only remember the man in the pale suit because I clocked him as overdressed. He had that same retired car dealer energy except different, not flashy. The suit was old-fashioned, like your grandfather's Easter clothes, cream color, almost white, and a thin tie. The thing my brain keeps circling is that I didn't notice him walk up. One moment it was the 4 of us and noise. The next, there he was, sliding into the chair at the end of our table, one hand resting neat on the tablecloth like he had been waiting for us to notice. Marla saw him first. She straightened and did her polite smile. "We can grab another chair if you want to sit," she said, because everything on a cruise is communal in a way that would be rude on land. He nodded, that short, grateful nod of someone who's used to doors being opened for him. He didn't say a word. He didn't touch the food. He just sat, angled slightly toward the aisle like he had sat down to rest and would be on his way. Up close, the cologne was obvious. Not trendy. Something old and mineral. If you could bottle rust and make it a luxury fragrance, that... The memory of his face is slippery. Thin and pale, but not sick. Hair combed straight back, eyes light-colored. The thing Naomi remembers is the hands. They were clean, she says, and then she stops. The crew joke, the drunk laugh, the hum, it all softened around him for me, like he sat just behind a pane of glass. Vic leaned forward to make him feel included. "You just bored? Hell of a crowd tonight, huh?" The man looked at him without blinking and smiled with his mouth, not his eyes. To be clear, I don't mean his eyes were cold in the dramatic sense. I mean he wasn't doing the normal micro expressions you do when you're talking. He was like a photo. Still. Then he turned his head a few degrees and watched a tray of brownies go by like this was the thing he had come to see. "Want something?" Marla offered. "It's all good if you don't mind getting full this late." The man reached into his jacket pocket like he was about to pull out a handkerchief. He pulled out nothing. His hand rested in the air for a second as if he had forgotten what he was doing. Then he lowered it. He smiled again. He still didn't speak. He sat with us like that for maybe 3 minutes. That's it. Not long enough to be a story. When he stood, his chair legs made no sound against the floor. That's the detail Vic repeated over and over later like a splinter he couldn't dig out. On a ship, everything moves and squeaks. People scrape chairs, they bump things. He just rose and the chair didn't move. He stepped back without turning his shoulders and walked toward the glass doors out to the pool deck. No one got out of his way. No one noticed him except the 4 of us. Marla said in that tone you use when you're a polite person and someone is weird. Okay, that was something. She took a sip of her drink. Naomi and I looked at each other. Vic laughed too loud. He looked embarrassed, like maybe he felt bad that the guy had sat alone for a second and none of us invited him to join in. Then Vic sniffed and made a face. "You smell that?" he asked. "Like pennies." That was the first time. I know because it was the first time I looked up at one of the corner cameras and thought, I wonder if that thing saw him. We ran into Vic and Marla at trivia the next day, and that somehow turned into drinks at sunset and plans to meet up for the midnight buffet again, because why sleep when you can eat bad lasagna at 12:30 a.m.? They were the kind of couple who are easy to like, and Naomi liked having easy people around. It made everything feel safe. Cruise life is curated like that. The staff learn your name on day 1 and wave like they mean it. Every problem has a laminated answer. Midnight came again, and so did the tacos. The buffet wasn't as crowded this time. A few college kids clumped around the dessert station. A family argued about mac and cheese. We took the same table without realizing it was the same table until we sat down and the routine locked into place. Vic made a joke about the man in the pale suit like he was an inside joke now. I remember saying, "Do rich people even do cruises?" and Naomi snorting. He sat down the way he did the night before. No footsteps, no scraping, a presence, and then an empty chair no longer empty. Pale suit, thin tie, same angle toward the aisle, same hobby of watching trays go by. He glanced at us like he was checking we were still here. I looked up immediately at the same corner camera. The lens stared back. The man's hair was damp this time, like he'd stepped in from rain. Not dripping, just sleeked back with water. His hands were folded right over left on the tablecloth. If you're picturing him breathing, stop. I don't remember that. I remember that the air tasted stronger. Naomi set down her fork and rubbed her thumbnail over her other fingers, a nervous habit. Vic tried again. "You with the captain tonight, Mr. Whitesuit?" He smiled to make it a joke. The man turned his head toward Vic and held that smile again, notches of teeth showing. Still no words. I felt a stupid, sudden urge to ask him if he was okay, if he needed help. It wasn't a ghost feeling. It was the feeling you get when you see someone older in a new place and worry they're lost. I leaned forward and said, "Are you looking for someone?" The man looked at me for the first time like I'd stood up. His eyes were light but not baby blue. Old photo gray, the color that fades first. I felt watched, weighed, measured, and dismissed. He stood again without sound and went toward the glass doors. I'm not proud of this, but I followed. I didn't want to be the guy who told a creepy story later without actually taking 2 steps to figure it out. The doors slid open and spilled humid dark. The pool deck had emptied out except for a line of towels like a quiet party had given up. I saw no one in a pale suit. I walked to the railing and looked down at the black water shouldered into light by the ship. I looked left and right. Nothing. No white, no cream. A woman in a hoodie walked by and gave me the look you give to people who seem like they're about to be sick. When I came back inside, Naomi had that tight-lipped look that meant she wanted me not to make a thing out of something. Vic, on the other hand, had turned his head toward the glass like a hunting dog. "Where'd he go?" he asked. I shrugged like I hadn't been annoyed. "Outside. then gone. That was when the security officer came by our table. If you've never noticed, there are always a couple of crew walking the public decks late. Security guys in navy pants with polite smiles that never reach their eyes. This one had a name, tag that said Lewis, and a face like he'd had to say sorry 1,000 times in 3 languages. He had the posture of someone who'd been a cop somewhere else. He asked if everything was okay. No edge to it. Just the way you ask when you saw something and your job is to ask. Yeah, Vic said too fast. All good, just someone sitting here and then not. He made a joke of it. Luis smiled at that particular nothing and nodded. He moved on. We finished our food. It felt silly, and then it felt heavy in the way silly things do after midnight. We decided to call it. We said goodnight to Vic and Marla and promised to meet for breakfast. Naomi and I made our way to the aft stairwell because she liked cutting through the quiet back hallways, where the carpet pattern made you dizzy if you looked too long. That was when I smelled it for the second time. That rust salt smell, stronger, like we had stepped into an older part of the ship. The stairwell door had one of those windows that are scuffed to hell from luggage. Through the glass I saw a man's shoulder, pale fabric. The door swung open to let someone else out and we squeezed in. Empty. The stairwell was empty. The door, shut with the soft thumping sound of a pressurized seal. Naomi reached for my hand. She didn't move closer. She didn't say she was scared. She just laced our fingers and we walked up one flight and out. The next morning I woke up to a paper slid under our door. Not a bill. A note from guest services saying security would like to speak with us at our convenience. It wasn't ominous. We'd seen a waiter drop a tray of glasses and watched 3 people in suits materialize to fix the problem like the hull had sprung a leak. These ships run on noticing. Luis was the one who met us in the little office by the midship elevators. He apologized for bothering us and asked if we would mind answering a few questions about a guest who may be unwell. He was careful with words. He asked us to describe the man. Naomi did. I added details. Vic and Marla were already there. In 2 gray chairs, Marla's hands knotted in her lap. She gave me a little wave like we were seeing each other in a grocery store. Vic looked uncomfortable, like the office was too hot. Luis asked if we'd be willing to watch a bit of camera footage to resolve a small discrepancy. He didn't say which camera. He didn't wink like TV. He walked us through a door into a room that had too many screens and the hum my high school computer lab had. On one of the screens I saw the corner of the midnight buffet from last night. The date timestamp in the lower right corner crawled forward as we watched our group sit down. I saw myself laugh and wipe my face with a paper napkin. I saw Vic wave at someone off screen. I saw Marla gesture with her cup. I saw Naomi tuck her hair behind her ear. 4 people at a table. 4 chairs. The chair at the end of the table stayed empty. Go ahead and tell me when you see the person you mentioned sit, Luis said. We watched ourselves turn in unison and look toward the corner. We watched our heads track a presence moving toward our table. We watched the 4 of us shift our bodies to make room, and the empty chair stayed empty. No pale suit, no thin tie, no body between the edges of the frame and us. The empty chair was suddenly not empty in our minds because of how our shoulders made space for what wasn't there. We watched me glance up at the ceiling like I was doing a bit. We watched me stand and go toward the glass doors. We watched. The doors slide open to show nothing but black and silver light. Sometimes these things are laggy, I said, hating the sound of my voice. Luis said nothing. He let us keep watching. The footage showed the chair at the end of our table. A moment later, it showed the chair pushed back an inch. None of our hands were near it. That made my throat feel cold. On the screen, we kept talking to the empty chair. We kept offering it food. This is a trick, right? Vic asked. He laughed, but there was no air under it. Luis shook his head, slow. I wanted to make sure you saw what we see. Sometimes perspective can be strange. What is it then? Marla asked. A glitch? A weird angle? Could someone be sitting that we can't see because of reflection? Luis moved the footage back and forth. He zoomed. I watched pixels try to become meaning. He didn't offer an explanation. He turned off the screen. The room felt instantly smaller. Here's what I can tell you. he said. "You are not the first to tell us about a guest in a light-colored suit. We have not been able to confirm that guest on our manifests. We have had no medical emergencies consistent with someone needing help in that area. If you see this person again, please do not follow. Please let a crew member know and go somewhere well-lit." "Who is he?" Naomi asked, and the question sounded like she hadn't meant to ask it out loud. There was an answer in her head she didn't want, the way you sometimes can hear your brain slide toward a word like a marble finding a groove. Luis's eyes flicked to a coworker, a woman in a navy vest who hadn't said a word and who now pretended to look at a clipboard. He set his mouth in a straight line. "There are stories. I don't like stories. They make guests nervous. Ships are safe, do you understand?" He looked at each of us until we nodded. He walked us out like a polite waiter, shook our hands, and told us to enjoy our port day. We stepped into sunshine that felt staged. A steel drum band somewhere played Three Little Birds for the 90,000th time. The ocean looked like a pool somebody forgot to vacuum. This is where a different version of me would have laughed it off. We did the tourist thing. We bought hats we didn't need. We took a glass-bottom boat tour with a guide who told the same jokes he'd told every day for the last 4 summers. We ate conch fritters and drank too much. We smiled in photos. Every so often I caught Naomi sniffing the air the way you sniff milk you're not sure about, and every time she shook her head and made herself smile bigger. On the second night, at sea again, a storm caught us. The captain did the captain thing over the intercom, using the special voice meant to make people calm. "We expect some movement overnight. Please secure items in your staterooms and exercise caution on open decks." People cheered in the dining room like they were on a ride. The ship began to move in a way I had not anticipated. Less bobbing, more a long, thoughtful lean as if it were checking what you're made of. The hallways developed a tilted funhouse feeling, where the carpet pattern made it look like you were drunk, even if you weren't. The midnight buffet still happened. Of course it did. Fewer people came. The ones who did had that adrenaline look. Vic and Marla met us by the soda machines, hair a little wild from the wind that sneaks in when doors open. We took that same table because by then it felt like ours. We had become the kind of group that made jokes about being cursed. It made the fear smaller, like naming a dog. I told Vic if the guy in the pale suit came back, I was going to ask him what brand of cologne he wore because it was starting to ruin my appetite. When he sat down, my stomach fell. You know when a sound is too loud and your body tightens before your brain registers it? It was like that, except for a quiet. He sat, hands folded. His suit looked wetter this time. The crease in his trousers had lost a fight with water and then dried in the wrong direction. Threads on his right cuff were furred like they'd rubbed a rough surface. He looked at me the way a person looks at a horizon before they decide to vomit. I felt insulted without knowing why. "Sir," I said, and heard my voice choose that word because I wanted this to be normal. "Can we help you with something?" The smell of coins got stronger. Not waves, not seaweed, coins, and a hint of something. Electric, like a train station. He tilted his head as if he was listening to something far away. The ship listed and the plates on our table slid a fraction of an inch and stopped when they hit napkins. He stood. The chair did not scrape. He walked toward the doors. I didn't stand up as fast this time. I had a new rule in my head I couldn't quite articulate. If you go out there after him, you might not come back as yourself. Naomi touched my wrist. "Don't," she said. Her eyes were glassy with the reflection of the lights. We didn't have to follow. The doors to the pool deck blew inward and let wet air punch the room. A crew member in a rain jacket tried to get people to take the long way around, away from the slippery flooring. The man in the pale suit was a step beyond the threshold now, as clear as a person gets. He didn't get soaked by the wind-blown spray. His hair didn't move. He walked like the ship in the storm were a movie behind him. He walked toward the far set of stairs that go up to the top observation deck where no one had any reason to be during bad weather. Vic swore under his breath. "I'm not making this up," he said, as if I had accused him of that. He stood, like he couldn't not stand. Marla stood, disobeying a fear you could see in the set of her shoulders. I stood because they stood. Naomi stood because I did and said my name in a way that stretched the syllables thin. We stepped into the wind. It was the kind that steals your words out of your mouth. Rain came in sheets that ticked on the stretched fabric over the pool bar. The deck was slick. A crew member waved us back. We did what people do when they know better but believe in exceptions. We smiled and kept going. The man in the pale suit reached the bottom of the metal stairs and placed one hand on the rail. Even in that noise, I swear I heard the sound of metal, not a hand on the stair, like a ring tapping. He climbed slow. I counted without meaning to, 5 steps, then 7, then 10. He didn't look back. At the top, the observation deck was abandoned. Stacked deck chairs thrummed against their straps. The wind came clean up here. You could see the edge of the weather, lighter here, darker there, like an animal shifting its weight. The man walked to the railing and stood with his back to us, facing black. It was nothing dramatic, no arms spread, no show. He stood like a commuter heaving a sigh at a bus stop. I was suddenly, stupidly angry. The fear flipped and became hot. "Hey," I yelled, "turn around." He didn't. "Turn around, man. What is this?" He turned his head, as if my voice were behind him and not to his left. I stepped toward him because anger is a leash you put on yourself. Naomi grabbed my forearm hard enough to leave a bruise I saw the next morning. "Don't," she said again, and it was a rope we both held. Vic moved past me. He was a nice man, and nice men hate rudeness more than they should. He went to stand a foot from the pale suit and did that older guy dad thing where you make your voice stern but polite. "Sir, it's not safe up here. We're gonna get you somewhere warm." He put his hand out toward the man's elbow. His hand never made it. His fingers hung in the air an inch from the fabric like they'd met glass. The smell hit harder. I gagged. It was metallic and not, like hot wires and wet pennies. The ship rolled and the horizon went wrong and the stacked chairs clacked against one another like teeth. The pale suit man tilted his head toward the lower deck, toward a single lonely deck chair that had escaped its strap and sat by itself near the railing facing the water. I saw it and hated it instantly. The chair had been dragged there. You could see the marks where its legs bit wet deck and left 2 dark lines. Marla made a sound. I didn't have time to think it through. I grabbed Vic's wrist and yanked him back. That broke whatever line was being drawn between the man in the suit and the chair, because the man turned a quarter turn toward us. Up close, there was nothing dramatic to his face. No skull, no sewn mouth. He looked like a man in the late 60s who'd been handsome once. His eyes were that light gray that makes older people look like they've been thinking too hard. He opened his mouth like he was about to say a simple sentence. The wind drowned it. Or maybe there was nothing. He looked at each of us. When his gaze hit mine, the world chilled out from my skin in. My fingertips got cold in my palms. My tongue tasted like I'd bitten a battery. I don't believe in a lot, but I believed in gravity and the way it felt wrong then. Like the deck under me was a rumor. "Time to go," Luis said, and I jumped because I hadn't heard him approach. 2 security officers had made it up behind us. One of them had a hand on Naomi's elbow. Luis had that voice again, the one that moved people. "Everyone inside," he said. "Now." He looked at the man in the pale suit and did not look surprised. He didn't look scared. He looked tired. We obeyed because in some situations you remember the shape of authority and are grateful for it. We moved as a little group. The man in the pale suit didn't move. For a second, it was like leaving a conversation you'll never get to finish. We got to the stairs. Luis looked back. The man had turned all the way toward the railing again and set his hand on it. He leaned forward like someone smelling rain. The ship leaned too, in a long, slow arc, and the lights around the deck did that blink like they were thinking of going out. We reached the lower deck and the wind blew sideways hard enough to make Naomi laugh in that hysterical relief way. We were 20 feet from the sliding doors when every speaker on the deck crackled. Not the soft chimes they use for announcements. A pop, like plugging in a guitar amp. For a second, I thought it was the captain. Static filled the air in a way that made the hair on my arms rise. Through it came a sound I still can't convince myself wasn't a voice. A thin, high note like a whistle held for too long by a patient person. Then it cut. The light steadied. The smell lifted. A deckhand, in a yellow jacket, was pulling a single chair backward by its back legs along the wet deck, away from the railing. He looked like a guy moving something in his living room when his wife tells him it's bad feng shui. I watched the legs leave 2 fresh tracks in the water and thought about the identical tracks that had been there before we came upstairs. The deckhand didn't look up at us. He didn't look at the chair like it was anything. He moved it back to the stack, tied the strap, and then, for a second, put his hand flat on the top chair like he was reassuring it. Then he hustled off. We went inside. The pressure change popped my ears. The ship's interior swallowed the storm. We stood in the bright hall with wet clothes clinging to us like we'd been in a pool. Luis told us to head to our cabins and offered to call someone to send hot tea. He talked like you talk to people after a car accident. Did you see him? I asked before he could get away with that calm voice. Did you see him this time? Luis paused. He picked his words like he was checking them for sharp edges. I saw you 3 on the top deck during a storm. I saw a chair by a railing that shouldn't have been there. He looked at me until I stopped. I will file a report and review the footage. You will not go up there again. It wasn't a question. We nodded. We stood there too long in a circle like people after a fire drill. Vic reached for Marla's hand and she let him have it with both of hers. Naomi said nothing. We slept badly. The ship creaked and twisted, announcing each movement to the furniture like old bones talking in a quiet room. At 3:12 a.m., I woke up, sure someone had opened our cabin door. It was shut. The light from the hall made a thin rectangle under it. The air in the room had a little more weight than air usually does. Naomi was awake too. She reached for me. You smell that? She whispered. We lay there and pretended we didn't. The next day, our note from guest services came earlier. Another meeting. Luis again. He looked more tired. He didn't bother with the big room full of monitors. He showed us a clip on a tablet. The 4 of us, wind-tangled, walking toward the top deck stairs. The observation deck, empty except for a white glare of water in the line of the rail. The single chair by the rail, turned toward the sea as if someone had set it there for the view. No man in a pale suit, no person at all. There was a moment, if I'm honest, there were 3 frames, where the image shivered, and I could put a person there with my mind like when you see Jesus in Toast, and if you freeze and slow and squint, there's a hint of shape. But that's for me. The footage did not require a ghost to make sense. It only required us to be wrong. Luis let us watch the part where the chair moved. I had expected it not to, like maybe I'd imagined even that. On the screen, the chair by the railing didn't slide or jolt. 1 second it was by the rail. Then the frame blinked because the recording skips microseconds, and the chair was 2 inches closer to the rail. 3 blinks later, it was 4 inches closer. Another blink and the legs were right at the scupper line where water runs off. No hands on it. No wind strong enough to drag only one thing. I felt my jaw clench. If you want to argue physics with me, please do it somewhere else. I know how wind works. I know how water works. It is a heavy chair. What is he? Marla asked, barely above a breath. Luis rubbed his temples like a man with a headache that lives behind his eyes. People have stories. Some believe every ship keeps stories, every accident, every goodbye. People go to sea for happy reasons and sad ones. We are very good at counting heads. We are very bad at counting reasons. That's not an answer, Vic said. It's the only one that doesn't make me a liar, Luis said. He set the tablet down like it weighed more than it should. My job is to keep you safe. Safety on a ship is 90% not going where you feel like going. You're curious people. It is good to be curious. Please don't put your curiosity next to a rail in a storm again. They offered us a spa credit, which is what you do when guests see something they shouldn't. We declined and took it anyway because we didn't know how to turn down help from any quarter. We avoided the midnight buffet that night. We stayed in our cabin with room service and watched an old movie with the volume low and the subtitles on. The ship was gentler now, not still but steady, like it had remembered how to be itself. Naomi fell asleep with her head on my shoulder and the room smelled like French fries and lotion. Around 1 a.m, a knock came at our door. Not the rapid, urgent knock of staff. The polite, patient knock of a neighbor. I knew it was Vic or Marla before I stood up. I opened the door and there they were, both in sweatshirts and flip-flops, eyes bright with the kind of fear that wears a friendly face on top like a mask. "I'm sorry," Marla said immediately, because she is the kind of person who apologizes as she is drowning. "Can we sit here for a minute? Our room smells like metal, and the chair by the window was pulled out when we woke up. I know that's nothing, but I hate it." We let them in. Naomi made tea with a weird little kettle that looks like a prop. We sat on the edge of the bed like college kids. Vic looked at the floor. "I don't want to be dramatic," he said, "but I want to get off this ship." "We're in the middle of the ocean," Naomi said. "We're literally bound to it until morning." "I know," he said. He rubbed the heel of his hand against his chest like it hurt, and he didn't want to say that part out loud. "I keep hearing something small, like someone tapping pipes, to get attention." When I went to the bathroom, the mirror was fogged like someone had just showered. Our shower is bone dry. I put my hand up to wipe it, and there was already a handprint there. I know. It could be anything. We didn't sleep. We stayed like that until sunrise burned the room into color. When the announcement came that we could disembark for Nassau, Vic and Marla were first in line to get their cards scanned. I watched them walk down the gangway with a relief so big it looked like a mistake. They didn't come back. Guest services called us that afternoon to say our friends had opted to extend their stay on the island and fly back to Houston from there. Marla texted Naomi that they'd found a cheap hotel and they were sorry to ditch and please let's grab a coffee in the terminal back in Miami if the timing worked out. Her typing bubbles appeared and disappeared 3 times after that, like she didn't know how to choose words. On our last night at sea, we went to the midnight buffet by accident. The habit was stronger than our fear. We told ourselves we wanted to stand in bright places with lots of people. It was crowded again, all the nervous energy of people trying to wring the last drop of vacation out of the clock. We took a table, far from our usual. We did not look toward the glass doors. We did not try to be brave. We ate cake and talked about nothing. We were almost done when I felt the smell before the air changed. Naomi put her fork down. I looked up and every light in the room seemed a little whiter. The chair across from me slid back an inch. No one touched it. I didn't look. I looked at Naomi and made conversation about whether the coffee was actually coffee or just brown water in a costume. She answered, shaking, playing along. The chair slid another inch. A napkin that had been folded by an invisible hand lifted like breath, stirred it, and then fell flat. My heart hammered in my throat, and all the thoughts I had about rational explanations lined up and fell off a cliff. Someone laughed too loud at the carving station. A pop song tripped over itself on the speakers and started again. The chair stayed where it was, far enough from the table for a man to sit. We stood together holding our trays like shields and walked them to the tray return. We walked out into the ship's bright spine of hallway, turned down a softer carpeted stretch and rode the elevator to our deck. Another couple got off with us and said goodnight. We said it back in the voice you use to keep a stranger from noticing your hands. We reached our door. The lights on our keycards blinked green. We went in. The single chair by the small round window had been pulled out and angled toward the glass. There was a faint dark line on the carpet where the leg had dragged. On the cushion was a damp patch the shape of a sitting person. The room smelled like rust and salt and the inside of a battery. I went to push the chair back in because that was the only thing my body knew how to do. My hands closed on the chair's back and stopped as if the air were thicker there. Not a shock, not a resistance. A tension, like pulling against a current. I pushed harder. The chair gave a centimeter and then another. I set it flush with the vanity and left my hand on it. The wood under my palm was cold, not cool like air conditioning, cold like it had been put away wet and forgotten in a basement for a year. I pulled my hand back and watched the condensation line on the window melt and reform as if a forehead had rested there and then moved away. We didn't sleep. We watched the window. The ship moved steadily. No storm. The horizon was the soft, red smear you get right before sunrise when the night has to let go. At 6, the smell was gone, burned away by light and coffee and bacon from down the hall. We got off the ship in Miami and did the dumb, happy thing people do at the end of vacations. We took a selfie with the ship behind us and said something on the caption about needing a vacation from our vacation. Vic and Marla weren't there. They texted later that week to say they made it home fine and maybe next year all 4 of us would go somewhere boring like Kansas. Marla added a smiley face that somehow made it sound like a prayer. Back in our apartment, we did exactly what you think. We told ourselves we'd had a weird experience and that weird experiences don't have to mean anything. We went to work. We did laundry. We joked about the cruise line's cologne line called Old Pennies. It was funny until it wasn't. 2 nights after we got home, I woke up to the sound of our living room chair moving. It was a small, soft scrape like someone shifting their weight and the chair's legs saying hello to the floorboards. I lay there and told myself it was the fridge cycling or the cat my neighbor refuses to admit is his. I got up and walked to the doorway. The chair was angled toward the window. There was a faint oval in the cushion where a person had been. The window had a small half-moon of fog at forehead height that disappeared as I watched. The air did not smell like home. It smelled like metal and salt and the first breath you take when you step out of an airplane door into humidity. I went over and touched the chair. It was room temperature. I slid it back. It rolled too easily, like the floor, sloped toward the window, and I'd never noticed. Naomi stopped sleeping with her back to the window. She started closing the curtains tight and setting a glass of water on the sill like you do in a folklore story for a thirsty guest. I started hearing a knocking under the fan when the apartment was very quiet. Too regular to be the building, too irregular to be a pipe. Sometimes when I ride the train to work and the air in the car is stale and electric with too many phones, I catch a whiff of rust that comes from nowhere, and I look up expecting to see a man in a pale suit standing by the doors, still as a photograph listening to a station that isn't ours. I have the security footage on my phone, not the one from the office. Luis would not give me that, and he was right. A kid at the dessert station took a video the last night for his Instagram because he thought the storm from the day before might repeat, and he wanted to catch lightning. His camera left the window and wandered my way just in time to catch an empty chair pull itself back an inch on an otherwise quiet deck. In the audio, nothing reacts. No one sees it. He had no idea he'd filmed anything strange until he got home and played it with the sound off. He DM'd me because Naomi had posted about our haunted cruise in a way that made it sound like a joke. He wanted to know what he'd caught. He wanted me to say wind. Sometimes I show the clip to people who are brave and want to be scared. Sometimes I don't because I'm tired of seeing the way their face changes when they try to fit what they're seeing into a world that feels safe. The clip is short. It doesn't prove anything. It won't change your mind if you don't already believe in chairs that move by themselves. I keep thinking about that chair set by the railing. It wasn't facing the pool or the bar or anything worth watching. It faced the black water like the ocean had a showtime and someone had picked their seat for it. The crew pulled it back. Then the storm passed. Then, I guess, somebody put it there again. This is the part where I should wrap it up with a message about not following your curiosity to the edge of a railing. I will say this instead. I don't think he wanted us to go over. I don't think he wanted us at all. I think we were furniture in his version of events. He was the passenger. We were the ones who weren't there. If you go on a cruise and a man in a pale suit sits down like he belongs to the chair more than the chair belongs to the floor, don't be brave. Don't be polite. Let the crew handle it. Go somewhere loud and normal where people are bad at karaoke. If you pass the pool deck late and you see a single chair pulled to the rail, turn toward the dark, keep walking. Chairs are for living people. Let the missing ones take the aisle seat. I never planned on working security on a cruise ship. I was 26 in 2012, a year out of the military and pretty much game for anything that paid me to be near the ocean. The cruise line called it loss prevention, which sounded like shoplifting at a mall. In reality, it meant all the awkward late-night human stuff nobody wants to talk about on vacation. Fights, missing wallets, people drinking too much or not enough and falling apart, and sometimes things that didn't fit neatly on a report. Our ship did a 7-day loop in the Caribbean, Miami, Nassau, a private island, then back across water that looked like a screensaver. You stop thinking about the ocean as water after a while. It's just the floor that moves. The first day is always a blur. Muster drill. People learning how their key cards work. Lines for everything. The second day is when people finally relax and weird things start to happen. That's the day a boy went missing. I remember the call because of the father's voice. We were on deck 9 by the main pool doing a slow walk to show the uniform when the radio cracked. LP to deck 7 forward corridor. Family reporting minor separated. Please respond. The dispatcher sounded calm. The father didn't when I got there. He was tall, sunburn just starting to show around his neck. An American sports team hat that had all the salt rings. He had both hands on a cabin door like he thought he could push it open by will. His wife was crying without sound in those tight little breaths that bob your shoulders. Their daughter, maybe 12, stood to the side clutching a beach towel and staring at nothing. He went down to grab sunscreen, the father said, before I even introduced myself. We're right there, on the pool deck. He said he forgot. It was 5 minutes. His card won't work and ours won't either. We tried the backup, that door is jammed or something. The door was 7234. I knew that corridor. You could smell laundry from the crew passage around the corner when they popped the hatch. A warm cotton scent that always made me think of middle school gyms. I tried my MasterCard. The light on the lock should flash green. It flashed amber, then red. Not unheard of. Systems hiccup. I hit the radio and called Daryl, my shift lead. You need a physical override? He asked. Yeah, I said. Card reader's not taking it. All right, I'm on my way. Keep the family there. Don't let anyone else crowd the corridor. While we waited, I did the normal questions. Age, clothes, name, Owen, 8, blue swim shorts with cartoon fish on them, a white shirt that already had ketchup on it because of the burger bar. He liked to hop every third step because his mom told him not to. At some point, the mother wiped her face and asked me if this kind of thing happened often. I told her the truth, which was yes and no. Kids wander, ships are big, they make friends at the pool and forget to tell you. But doors, usually open. Daryl showed up with a black case that looked like something you'd see in a spy movie. In reality, it's a glorified screwdriver set and a metal rod with a chip in it. The rod hits a contact hidden in the lock. It's the ship's version of a skeleton key. We'd only used it a handful of times, and then usually because someone double-latched the inside without realizing it. He went through the motions. Swipe, light, tap. The lock chirped, thought about it, and refused. Again, the father said, louder now. I'm doing it again, Daryl said, with that customer service, calm that makes angry people angrier. He tried 3 times. Same result. Okay, we might have a stuck bolt. Sometimes the latch catches when the father put his palms on the door like he was going to push through it. Open it. We will, Daryl said, and tapped his radio for a maintenance call. We're going to get a tech here. If the bolt is misaligned, he can back the plate off and I don't care about plates, my son is in there. We don't know that, I said, keeping my voice soft. There are a lot of places he could have stopped. The arcade's 1 floor down aft. Kids love it. We'll check cameras. But right now we'll get this door open. The maintenance guy, Mateo, came fast. He always did. Young, shaved head, sleeves rolled and a pencil tucked behind his ear. He had the magic touch with ship doors. I'd watched him fix a cabin safe in under a minute with a magnet and patience. He set down his kit, listened with his ear to the seam where the door met the frame, and frowned. Feels like pressure, he said to nobody in particular. Like, it's sucking a little. Daryl and I looked at each other. Pressure makes sense in engine rooms and fire doors. not in a standard stateroom. But ships play by their own rules. Matteo used a thin plastic wedge to make the tiniest gap, then slid the metal chip rod in again. "You'll feel it when it clicks," he murmured. "You can hear it." He pushed, pulled, shifted his weight like a safecracker. The light stayed stubbornly red. He swore under his breath and then tried the old-fashioned way. 2 flat bars, a cloth to protect the wood, a gentle prying movement like opening a paint can. He was careful. He never marked doors. On the 3rd try, the lock gave a short, electronic beep that sounded like a toy dying. The bolt retracted. The father didn't wait for the handle. He turned it and shouldered in so fast Matteo had to hop backward. The cabin lights didn't come on. That's the first thing I noticed. On our ships, when you open a guest door, the motion sensor triggers the lights unless the key card is in, the slot inside. Some people like the lights off to nap. Some people forget to put the card in. But on a bright afternoon, most cabins are lit up like a hotel. This one was dark, cold too. The kind of chill that lives in unlit basements and server rooms. The curtains were closed. The bed was still made, corners crisp. It looked like a brochure. I smelled something faint and clean like hotel soap and something else under it. Something stale, like a drawer left closed too long. The father went straight to the bathroom, because that's what you do when you want to prove someone is just behind a door. The mother hovered at the threshold like stepping into the room meant admitting he wasn't in the hallway laughing. I flicked on my flashlight. The beam looked thick, which sounds stupid, but that's how it felt, like it had to push through, cold stuff in the air. The father banged the bathroom door open. "Please, don't," I started, but it didn't matter. He was already inside. Then he shouted, not words, just noise. We crowded around the doorway. There was no kid in the bathroom. There was just a mirror that shouldn't have been fogged up. Ship cabins are dry. The air conditioning runs all day. You can leave a glass of water out and the rim will bead. But mirrors don't fog unless you've just taken a long hot shower. Nobody had. The towels were folded, flat as the day crew left them. But the mirror was smeared with a dull, even condensation. And right in the middle of it was a handprint. Not a clear one, not like you see in the movies. It was imperfect at the edges, like whoever pressed their hand there did it and pulled away while the fog was still forming. 5 fingers, slightly long, palm narrow. The size bothered me without me knowing why at first. It was too small for an adult. Too thin for a kid. I don't have a better way to say it than wrong. The mother made a small sound, tired and frightened, like a drawer being closed too hard. The sister backed into the hallway. I steadied the father with my shoulder because he looked like he was going to knock the sink off the wall. There are procedures for missing minors. We started them all. The bridge was notified. The chief security officer logged a code for internal tracking. We pulled hallway camera footage and checked the card logs. That cabin door hadn't registered a key since morning when housekeeping came through. The pool deck camera had a boy in blue swim trunks dancing in place every 3rd hop, just like his mom said, then running off screen when she told him to get the sunscreen. He never showed on the forward elevators. He didn't show on the stairwell footage either, but cameras on ships are like Christmas lights. Great when they work, and sometimes half a string goes out for no reason. You're always missing the one angle you need. We took the family to guest services and then to a quieter lounge because the mother started hyperventilating when a conga line went by. We made the ship smaller. We sent stewards to circle the open decks and call his name. We had an officer discreetly check the infirmary in case he had gotten dizzy and someone had walked him there. He wasn't anywhere simple. Daryl sent me back to guard the cabin until we could officially seal it. It's not a crime scene when you don't know a crime happened, but it is a place you don't want guests walking into by mistake. I sat on a folding chair by the door with a sign in my lap because the magnet we used for out of order wasn't there yet. Housekeeping walked by with linens and traded that knowing crew look with me. Chin up, half smile, an unasked, "You good?" That also means, "What's wrong over there?" Marina, the head housekeeper for that deck, came by about 20 minutes later. She's been at sea longer than anyone I know. She can make a bed so tight you could bounce a bottle cap off it. She peeked into the cabin, then backed out fast like she'd gotten a static shock. You turned the thermostat down? She asked. It's off, I said. I glanced at the wall controls. It read 68 degrees, which on our system is the lowest a guest can set it. It also read a red little icon that meant the system wasn't responding. I had seen that icon maybe twice. The mirror, she said. I saw. She looked up and down the corridor, then stepped closer. That room doesn't hold temperature. Sometimes I open it in the morning and it's like there's a breath, like it exhales. It's a feeling. She must have seen my face because she shrugged. Sir, I'm not saying ghost things. I'm saying the air is strange there. It's an old damper, I think. The engineer, the little one with the tattoo. She said the duct runs behind the bathroom. She paused, then added, almost stubborn, I clean it fast. Has anyone reported anything before? I asked. Noise, she said. Knocking sometimes. I think it is just pipes. People don't know ships. A pipe knocks, they think the devil is in the wall. She set the out-of-order sign on the door handle like a do not disturb and patted my arm. I will bring you coffee later. Daryl relieved me for dinner and told me to sleep with my radio on. I ate a crew meal I barely tasted. The mess hall TV was showing a game with the sound off. People around me were laughing. Bodies kept moving. It felt wrong that they were. I know that seems dramatic. We didn't know anything bad for sure. But when you see a family cracked open like that, it rewires your night. At 2 a.m, when the ship gets that quiet hum, the radio popped once on my nightstand. Gatto? That's what most of the crew called me. Long story involving a cat in St. Thomas. You awake? Yeah, I said. Daryl never called if it wasn't important. We sealed 7234, he said. We're keeping it that way until we hit Nassau. We'll have port authorities come aboard and do a full search if it comes to that. Families in a different room. Listen, I want you to do a rove on deck 7 forward while I take deck 8. Some calls. What kind? Guest in 7236 says they heard knocks from the sealed cabin. Also a child's voice. Then stopped. I'm sure it's just sympathetic. Noise and people getting wound up, but let's just be a presence. Over. I pulled on my uniform and went up 2 decks because the crew elevators were slow at night. The corridor outside 7234 looked like it always did at 2 a.m. Carpet that ate your footsteps. Emergency light glowing over the stairwell door like a nightlight. An abandoned room service cart down by the aft bend. I stood by the sealed door and listened. If you want to make yourself crazy, stand next to any closed door for long enough. Air sings in vents, pipes settle, doors expand and contract. I heard things. I tried to be a grown-up about them. At 2:19 a.m., clear as if someone was on the other side whispering, I heard a cough. A kid's cough. Short, tired, like the sound kids make when they're embarrassed about being sick. I stepped closer and the hair on my arms lifted. Then nothing. I keyed the radio, and before I could transmit, Daryl's voice hissed soft. You hear that? You too? I asked. I'm on deck 8, above you, he said. I heard it through the floor. We climbed stairs and met at the landing halfway. We looked like idiots, 2 grown men listening to the air, but we didn't laugh. It's probably the HVAC, Daryl said, because that's what you say when you don't want the other person to see your face. Marina said the duct runs behind the bathroom, I said. Pressure. We walked to 7234 and stood like we were waiting for the person inside to invite us in. The sign on the handle swayed a little in the current from the AC. Daryl touched the lock housing with 2 fingers. It's cold, he said, surprised. Then he stepped back. Nope. I'm creeping myself out. We did one more loop up and down the corridor and told the guests on either side we were just checking on a maintenance situation. On deck 8, I heard the shuffle of someone inside their room moving toward the door when we passed. I didn't blame them. The next morning, the sea was so calm people were doing yoga on their balconies. The missing person procedure widened. We prepared a more formal search. We did a second pass on the footage. The boy never appeared in the places he should have. You'd be surprised how many things go through a ship's back of house without ever being noticed. But children don't, not for long. A kid that age makes a ripple. The ship's hotel director took the family into a private office. I saw them go by. The dad held his hat like it was the only solid thing. The mother had a hand on the daughter's head, and the girl had that locked look kids get when they decide the adults are going to lie to them, and they're not going to help them do it. I went back to the cabin to relieve a junior officer who was done taking hallway patrol. I shouldn't have gone inside, I know that now, we weren't supposed to. But the door was sealed and dark, and there was a low, steady whine like a refrigerator running in a house when you've been gone for a few days. It felt like being watched by furniture. I used the master override because I still could from the outside. The lock light went amber, then green. The bolt retracted and then fought me for an inch like the door didn't want to peel away from the frame. When it did, the air that came out touched my face like a hand dipped in cold water. The bed was still made. The curtains were still closed. Nothing had been disturbed by anyone human. The bathroom door was ajar. I moved to the threshold and said very quietly, "Owen?" It's a foolish thing to do, but the name had weight now. The mirror was at it again. Not fogged all over this time. Not like last night. Just a small bloom spreading in a perfect circle from the center out, like someone had breathed on it and then kept breathing. I watched by accident, because I didn't want to see it, and couldn't look away. The bloom reached my shoulder height, and stopped. No handprint, no words, just a moist circle that should have needed steam to happen. I stood there and felt every part of my training evaporate into superstition. I stepped back and closed the bathroom door gently like I didn't want to wake someone. When I turned, the deadbolt on the cabin door clicked itself. I froze for a full second. The inside latch is a simple thing. A knob you slide. You can hear, it's set. That same sound came from the door behind me. I turned back and put my hand on the handle without thinking. It wouldn't move. I wasn't locked in. Those doors always allow exit from the inside, but the feeling of a latch setting, itself on the ship with the sea that flat made the whole room tilt. I stepped to the door, put my fingers on the latch, and slid it back. It moved. Easy. Fine. I told myself it probably settled. I told myself the ship flexes and metal moves. When I pulled the door closed, I heard a tiny sound like bare feet lifting off carpet on the other side of it, and I honestly couldn't tell if it came from the cabin or my own brain. I didn't go back in alone after that. We made Nassau the following day. The family disembarked there with a small cluster of officers around them like a bubble. You don't make people walk through the atrium alone when their son is missing. The Port Authority came aboard and did what they do, professionally, methodically. You think of TV shows. Those aren't built for ships. The cabin was photographed, scanned, measured. They pulled the panel off the bathroom vanity to look for voids. They checked the gaps around the bed platform. They had a little mirror on a pole they slid under things and a dog that sniffed and then sat, confused because it had nothing to tell us. When they were done, the lead investigator said something to our chief I couldn't hear. The chief nodded and looked down the corridor at me. We sailed at sunset with that cabin marked out of order. The sign was a small, polite lie to keep the rest of the ship comfortable. Guests walked past and talked about the next port. A group of teenagers took pictures by the weirdly locked door and laughed like they were at a haunted house. The girl from the family, Owen's sister, walked by once with her mother, a crew, member on either side heading for the gangway. She looked at the door and then at me and then at the floor, and I stupidly reached in my pocket and found the coin I flip when I need to keep my hands busy. It had warmed to my skin. I don't know why that's what I remember. We did more night roves on Deck 7. Each time we stood there, we heard something. Air, pipes, whispers we couldn't swear weren't made by our own heads. At 3:11 a.m. on the last night at sea, the guest in 7236 called again, voice shaking. She said she woke to the sound of someone trying her door from the hall. When she looked through the peephole, the hall was empty. She said then there were 3 taps from the wall she shared with 7234. I went by. I stood and listened. I told her I'd be in the corridor a while so she could sleep. And she cried a little with relief that made me feel both useful and like a liar. Right before dawn, when the ship does its slow, quiet shift toward home, I heard the elevator down the corridor. Ding! All the way forward where no guests should call it at that hour. I put my hand on my radio without keying it, just to feel something I could control. The elevator doors opened with that soft, rubbery sound. Nobody got out. The doors closed. I started toward it and then stopped because from inside the sealed cabin I heard the low, unmistakable sound of a voice counting. Not in words I could make out. Just the rhythm of it, like a kid playing hide and seek and whispering numbers to prove he was doing it right. I think I could have opened the door again. The master override would have worked. But I did not. I stood there and held my breath and listened to the counting stop, and then the smallest thump, like a hand on the door. At about knee height, I said the boy's name out loud again, and I shouldn't have, and the AC kicked on hard enough to push cold across my ankles. The sign on the handle swung and hit the wood once, twice, 3 times. We docked in Miami. We did what ships always do. Unload, reload, turn around. There's not a lot of room for grief in that machine. The cabin was still out of order. Maintenance planned to bring an engineer in with a meter to check the duct behind the bathroom. They wanted to rule out a negative pressure issue caused by a stuck damper. That's a reasonable theory. It might even be right. None of that explains the fog, but you tell yourself, part of a thing is enough. Before the next set of guests boarded, Marina asked me to walk with her to the cabin. She had a new girl on her team who didn't want to clean that section if the door was going to be taped shut. Just to show her, Marina said. Just to say it is nothing. We took off the magnet sign and I used the override. The door stuck for a tick again. When it opened, the room felt a degree warmer, like the air had decided to act right because more of us were there. Marina stepped in and set the fresh towels on the shelf by the bathroom. The new girl hovered in the hall, wide-eyed, chewing gum. I did a slow circle, not touching anything. Why I looked in the bathroom again, I don't know. Habit, hope, fear, all of it. The mirror was dry, no handprint, no breath. For a second I felt stupid for everything I'd felt. Then I noticed the faintest smear you only see when you lean and let the light rake across it. The kind of greasy residue fingers leave even after you wipe a surface a dozen times. I could see it because the ship had turned enough that sunlight pushed under the curtain and hit the glass. 5 long fingers. Not small, not adult. The same rung again. Marina saw it too. She made a sign of the cross so fast I almost didn't catch it. Okay, she said to the new girl, voice suddenly bright. We put the sign back. We call engineering if they want us to clean here. We don't go in alone. That afternoon, I was posted by the gangway as new guests streamed on. They dragged suitcases and took pictures under the welcome banner, and stepped over the threshold smiling like all the bad things in their houses couldn't follow them if they were at sea. A little boy ran past, hopping every 3rd step, and somewhere in my body something braced like a falling glass. He belonged to a different family. He had a different shirt. He shouted a different name and laughed. I let my shoulders drop. You want a neat ending. I do too. We never got one. I kept working the ship for another contract and then switched to a ship out of Galveston. I asked around when I could do it without being gross. On our old ship, 7234 stayed out of order for almost an entire cruise. Then one morning they fixed the pressure thing, according to engineering. Guests slept there again. Nobody reported fog or handprints, at least not to me. About 9 months later, I was on a late-down rove in my new ship's aft corridor. Different deck, different carpet, same life. When I walked past a door with an out-of-order sign hung on the handle with a strip of blue painters, tape instead of a magnet. That's not how we did it on that class of ship. I checked the number out of habit. It ended in 34. The font on the sign was the same we always used, but someone had written a tiny pencil mark on the bottom corner, like a note to themselves. I couldn't make it out. When I touched the lock housing with 2 fingers, it was normal temperature. When I put my ear to the seam, a service cart rattled at the far end of the hall, and I moved away like I'd been caught doing something tender. Every now and then, I'll stay in a hotel for something on land and wake up because the AC unit shudders. There will be a mirror on the opposite wall. It will show a streak from housekeeping that didn't quite wipe clean, or a trick of the curtain making a shape, and my stomach will fold in half and then I'll sit on the bed until it goes away. I keep a coin on my nightstand, same one from the day on deck 7. I turn it over sometimes without noticing. Both sides are smooth now. If you want to know what I believe happened, the honest answer is, I don't know. The sea takes things. That's not mystical, it's math. But ships also have their own weather. They carry their own rules. Metal remembers shapes. Air runs through ducts that were put there by men you'll never meet. Doors swell, and bolts stick. And 1,000 small sounds happen a day that you never notice until one line of them lines up and feels like a voice. I didn't see a boy vanish. I didn't see a hand press against glass with my own eyes. I saw the after. I heard the counting through a door I didn't open. I think about the father's hands on the wood and the way he said open it, like maybe he could break the idea of closed if he said it hard enough. I think about the mirror blooming on its own and the wrong-sized hand and the cough at 2 a.m. that was, I swear, not in my head. Sometimes I dream about walking that corridor and seeing the out-of-order sign on a different door every night, moving one cabin down like a chess piece. I wake up and tell myself I'm being dramatic. Then I'll go brush my teeth, and if the mirror is fogged even a little, I wipe it clean in one hard pass, and I don't look at the print my own hand leaves behind. I don't want to find out if it's the same shape. I don't want to give the shape a place to sit. A month ago, I was doing paperwork in the crew office when a message came in from a friend still on my first ship. It was a photo, one of those quick snaps people send without thinking. It was the corridor outside deck 7 forward. You could see a room service cart parked under the camera and a steward's legs walking out of frame. There was a small sign on a door handle that said out of order. The number was just out of view. In the reflection of the small brass peephole where the light hit it just so, there was what looked like a smear. 5 lines. Not clear. Not proof. He'd added no caption, just the emoji of a hand wave and a question mark. I didn't answer. There wasn't anything to say that didn't sound like a story. If you're asking yourself what you should do with this if you go on a cruise, I don't really have advice. Keep your kids close at the pool. Teach them to stop hopping every 3rd step. Don't go into rooms alone when something in you says don't. If a door won't unlock and the light flashes wrong and the air feels like a breath being held, step back. Wait for someone to stand with you. When you see the words out of order, believe them. And if you ever find yourself staring at a bathroom mirror that shouldn't be fogged, don't touch it. Let whatever is on the other side of that glass have the last fingerprint. Let it be the one thing you don't keep. I booked the cruise because it was cheap, because it was $19.99, and everyone was still talking about Y2K and dial-up internet, and whether the lights would go out on New Year's Eve. I had a week off between jobs, and my cousin Ben convinced me to go. Mediterranean loop, he said, tapping a glossy brochure with that cheesy photo of a ship cutting through blue water. Spain, France, Italy, Greece if we're lucky. One price. All you can eat. My girlfriend at the time, Claire, came along because she liked the idea of sleeping with the balcony door cracked so she could hear the waves. We were in our mid-20s, not rich, and the ship felt like a city that had agreed to pretend we belonged there. It's strange how well I remember the ship. The cigarette-stained carpets with that busy pattern that hides stains. The thrum of the engines coming up through the soles of your shoes. The way the hallways narrowed just enough to make you walk single file, pushing past carts loaded with towels. The casino smelled like old coins and perfume. The pool deck reeked of sunscreen and hot plastic. Every morning there was a folded daily navigator outside the cabin door telling us which bar had trivia and which lounge had a band and which restaurant required a jacket. The lounge at the stern was called the Wake, which I thought was a clever name until it wasn't. We saw her the first night down in the Wake. Blonde hair pinned low like a French twist that had gotten tired, green eyes that always looked like she had just understood a joke a second before you did. She wore the same uniform as the other cocktail waitresses, black skirt, white blouse, a dark green vest with the ship's crest, and a little oval name pin that said, Annika. She had a metal tray she balanced with one hand like it weighed nothing, and she threaded through people without ever bumping a knee. "What can I get you?" she asked, like she had already started the order in her head. "Gin and tonic," I said. "Beer," Ben said. "Whatever's cold." "White wine," Claire said, and then added, "Not too sweet." Annika nodded and smiled and said, "I'll bring you something crisp," and vanished toward the bar. The band played a cover of Smooth, and couples in that friendly cruise way danced like they had promised each other they would try. We had only been on the ship for a few hours. It was our first drink on board. Annika returned so fast it felt like we had imagined asking. The drinks were exactly right. Claire's wine was crisp, not sweet. Ben's beer had condensation that dripped onto a paper napkin stamped with the lounge logo. I reached for my wallet. This was when people still carried lots of cash traveling, and handed her a $10 bill. She put it in her apron pocket without counting and said, "Thank you, Alex." I hadn't told her my name. Maybe I said it at check-in and she overheard. Maybe she was good at reading lips. Claire raised an eyebrow at me but smiled because the wine was exactly what she'd wanted. When Annika moved away, a man at the next table leaned over and said, "They train them to remember. That's the secret." We saw Annika everywhere after that. First night late in the casino when we got brave and tried blackjack. She swept by with a tray of water glasses for gamblers who had been at it too long. Her eyes slid across the table, landed on the pile of chips I was bleeding faster than I liked, and she shook her head in a way that made me laugh at myself and tuck my wallet back into my pocket. Second day by the pool, she didn't have the tray. She had a bus tub of empty glasses, and when the contents sloshed, nothing spilled on her. She moved like the ship didn't move. That's the only way I can say it. The deck pitched and everyone staggered a little, adjusting, but Annika's balance never changed. Third afternoon in the photo gallery where they posted prints of everyone boarding in front of the fake life preserver, she came around the corner with that same smile, like she knew something and was deciding if she should tell you. By then, she had become one of those small cruise legends. The man at the blackjack table called her the magician. A woman in the hot tub told Claire that Annika worked both the pool deck and the aft lounge and sometimes the casino at night, which wasn't normal because most waitstaff stuck to a station. "She's everywhere," the woman said, adjusting, her sunglasses with fingers pruned from the hot water. "My husband says she never drinks water. That can't be healthy. You know how people on vacation talk like they've all been friends forever. Someone always knows something. That's how we heard about the girl in the doors. It wasn't a story yet. It was just a mutter in a hallway. I was turned around trying to find the men's room near the theater when I passed two stewards speaking, in Tagalog. I didn't understand most of it, but one said something that sounded like dumadaan sa pinto, which I didn't know then, but I would later learn means passes through doors. The other one made the sign of the cross and rolled his cart faster. We tried to find Annika on the staff board by the purser's desk. The board had little Polaroids of crew and a first name under each so guests could get to know the team. We looked because it felt like a small treasure hunt, something to do between trivia and dinner. We found a Lydia in entertainment, a Marco in bars, a Christina in guest services, but no Annika. It didn't mean anything. Maybe they hadn't updated the board. The ship carried over 1,000 crew. You don't even think about that until you're lost and a kid in a white uniform appears like he grew out of the wall and tells you which way to go. That night in the wake, Annika appeared the second the band finished a set. She set a glass of water on our table without us asking. "It's warm down here," she said. "You should drink." "Do you sleep?" Ben said, grinning. He can come off as a jerk when he thinks he's funny, but he tries for charming. "I sleep when it's calm," she said, and the way she said it turned the line into something else. I pulled a lira note from my wallet by accident instead of $1. We'd been in Naples that afternoon and I still had that soft Italian paper money mixed with cash. I laughed and swapped it out for a 10. "Wrong country." She glanced at the lira, and I swear her face changed, not unhappy, just hungrier, like she was remembering something that was hers. May I? She asked, not reaching but inviting me to offer. I don't know why I did. I gave her the lira and she tucked it into her apron, a careful fold. Thank you, she said. And then, as if it were normal, I'll bring your change. You don't have to, I said. I meant it like you say it to any waiter because you feel generous when you're 4 drinks in, and there's ocean out the window and you don't have to drive. I always bring change, she said, in a tone that sounds silly in writing but felt like a rule, and then she was gone. When she returned, she set down a small ship's wake matchbook with our change folded under it. I hadn't seen anyone using matches on board. Everything was electric. We weren't allowed candles in cabins. Smokers had their lighters, and even those were frowned at, but the matchbook was one of those old promotional ones with the lounge logo on the front and the ship's name in gold. The paper had a faint salt smell, like something you only imagine on vacation because everything smells like salt anyway. Canny? We ask something? Claire said, tipping her chin at the name pin. Where are you from? Your English is perfect. Annika's eyes softened in a way that didn't look sad until later. I'm from where the water is colder than this. Scandinavia? Claire said. That's a good guess, Annika said. And she smiled like she'd promised herself to only say so much. The longer you're at sea, the more the ship feels like a place that existed before you and will exist after you. On the 3rd day, I woke to the sound of rolling carts and someone talking softly in the hallway, and when I opened the door a crack, I caught Annika passing by with a tray of covered plates. She didn't see me. The tray tilted with the ship and the domes never slid. She turned toward a crew-only door, and instead of waiting for someone to buzz her in, she stepped through as another steward was pushing out. The door didn't open wide enough for both of them. She went into the gap and was gone, and he came out like no one had passed. He looked at me, seeing him, and looked away fast. At lunch, I tried to ask one of the bartenders about her. His name tag said Marco, and he wore a tie even though it was 90 degrees on deck. The blonde in your lounge, I said, pretending I wasn't trying to be discreet. Annika, he wiped the counter like in a movie where someone stalls so they can pick their words. We don't have Anika in bars, he said. She said she works the wake, I said, nodding toward the glass doors at the back where the ship's trail spread. White and flat behind us, Marco didn't look. He put a coaster down in front of me I hadn't asked for. Maybe you mean Annika with 2 N's, housekeeping. The one with blonde hair, I said. Green eyes. He shook his head. There is no Annika in bars, he said again, and smiled a smile that felt like a closed door. You want a beer? That was the first real odd feeling, not a ghost story feeling, just that sense of stepping wrong into a conversation and everyone around you pretending you didn't. I told Ben and Claire, and he laughed and said, maybe she's a stowaway waitress. Claire didn't laugh, she said. Did you actually see her walk through the door? I saw 2 bodies try to be in one space, I said. Either that, or she's fast. That night the ship hit a patch of rough water, so the captain announced they were closing the pool and some of the deck bars early. The wake didn't close because the wake is inside, tucked low and aft, that little room that hums like a throat when the engines are working hard. The band played slow songs because swaying felt like dancing anyway. We picked a table near the window and watched the wake glow like a white road in the dark. Annika came like we had called her. She set down waters again without us asking. You should drink, she said again. And there was something rehearsed about it now, like a reminder she had to give. Ben decided to push it. He waved a 50 like he was in a movie. We're tipping you early, he said, so you don't forget us. I never forget, she said. Not a creepy line when you're there. That's what I want to get across. The way she said it felt kind like she meant I won't forget what you like to drink. She took the bill. She didn't tuck it in exactly the same pocket as before. She slipped it into the folded matchbook and slid both into her apron like that was the right way to do it. We stayed past midnight. There's a point at sea where every clock feels like it's someone else's responsibility. When we left, Claire's napkin was wet with a ring of condensation from her glass. It made the faintest trace of an oval on the table's wood veneer, like a thumbprint. I think about that a lot. A mark left by cold, and a hand on the bottom of a glass. Back in the room, the ship rocked hard enough to make the hangers knock in the closet. I took a shower, and when I came out, the matchbook from the wake was on my pillow. I hadn't brought it back. I hadn't even noticed Annika taking it away with the change. Under the matchbook was the lira note I had given her the night before. Folded twice, damp like someone had held it with wet fingers. There was a number written inside the matchbook cover in pencil, not a cabin number because it had too many digits, and not a phone number because it didn't have an area code. It looked like a code of some kind. Claire said she hadn't put it there. Ben swore he hadn't gone in our room. I put the lira back in my wallet like I was embarrassed it had come back. I left the matchbook on the desk, and when I woke up, it was gone. On the fourth day, we docked in Marseille. We took the bus into the city and walked through the fish market where the octopus looked like alien hands. On the bus back, a couple from Manchester told us they had complained to guest services because the blonde waitress in the back bar had been ignoring them all week. "What blonde waitress?" the woman at guest services had said. "We don't have a blonde waitress in the wake." The man from Manchester laughed when he told us this because he thought it was a customer service trick. "She probably had a fight with her supervisor," he said. "Didn't want to admit she's been there." That afternoon, for reasons that sound stupid when I type them out, I went to guest services myself. I asked if I could speak to security because I had a question about a staff member. I'm not the kind of person who makes a fuss. I heard my father's voice in my head telling me I was being ridiculous, but the matchbook on my pillow had taken it out of the category of a fun vacation story. A man in a blazer with a radio clipped under his jacket came out and introduced himself as Officer Martin. He had a clipped accent and the kind of kind eyes that make you want to apologize. "I don't want to get anyone in trouble," I said. "I just want to know something. Does someone named Annika work in the wake?" He asked me to describe her, and I did. He wrote down my words like they mattered. He asked what time I had seen her, if I had seen her in other venues, if I had any photos. I laughed and said maybe, because we were carrying disposable cameras and it's amazing how little we photoed the staff then. He nodded like that made sense and said he could check the roster for me. He came back 5 minutes later and said, "There's no one by that name assigned to any venue currently open to guests." He said it in that careful way that left space for the possibility that he had made a mistake, or that there was some administrative gap, and I pretended I believed that. He added, "May I ask why you're inquiring?" I told him about the matchbook appearing in the cabin and the returned lira note. He asked our cabin number. He said he would have housekeeping check if someone had entered at an unusual time. I apologized again for bothering him. He said, "It's never a bother if you're uncomfortable on board." He turned to go and then turned back like he had made a decision. We do get, from time to time, reports of a person working aft who doesn't exist in our system. I can't explain that. I only ask that you don't follow anyone through a watertight door. It's dangerous. Back there. He said it like a dad whose kid has started to climb a fence. He smiled, not all the way. "Enjoy your evening." When I told Claire what he'd said, she asked if we could just spend the night at the piano bar instead. "New place, new waitress," she said. We tried that. A woman named Lydia sang, "My Heart Will Go On," and people ate it up unironically. For a while I forgot about Annika. The piano bar was midships and quiet, and you could feel the steady motion of the sea instead of the growl of the propellers. Then Ben came in from the hallway, waving us over like he was a kid and had found something cool. "She's down there," he said, "in the wake. And you won't believe this." We went. We walked down those stair steps that get narrower as they go, felt the temperature change as we descended, heard the band's bass before we saw the room. From the doorway, I watched as Annika came out of the service galley carrying a tray with 3 drinks. The service door is one of those heavy metal things with a porthole, and it has a hydraulic arm that makes it shut slow. Only this time, it shut fast and Annika was through it, and then for a second she wasn't anywhere at all, and then she was in the room. I didn't see the door open wide enough. I didn't see anyone hold it. She was one place, the door shut. She was another place. Ben's mouth was open. Claire's hand had found my wrist and gripped it until the bones lined up painfully. "Don't," Claire said, because she knew me and I was already moving. I went after Annika. I dodged a man in a white linen shirt who smelled like cologne and heat. I shouldered through that door and felt an instant drop in temperature like someone had opened a freezer. The service corridor back there didn't look like the rest of the ship. The floors were plain metal, not carpet. The walls were pipes and warning stickers. There was a long, straight stretch they called I-95, someone told me later. A highway that runs the length of the ship. The air tasted like coins. Annika stood at the far end of a cross corridor, her tray skewed on her hip like she had finally felt the ship's motion. She looked over her shoulder at me, and for the first time she didn't smile. I thought she was going to tell me to leave. Instead, she lifted her tray in a small gesture, almost a salute, and slipped right out of sight. I went right. My shoes clanged on the metal. I passed a gray door with red letters. Watertight door. Keep closed at sea. It was open a crack and water hissed through the gap soundlessly, like a recording of water played at the wrong speed. I know that doesn't make sense. The sound was wrong. I didn't want to look, but I did. Behind the door was another corridor, narrower, the paint different, older, the hazard stripes the wrong shade. The sign above the doorway didn't have the ship's name. It had a name I didn't recognize. I can see it and I can't write it. The letters were a little off, like a foreign language trying to be English. "Sir," someone said behind me, "you can't be back here." It was a steward, Filipino, early 20s, face gone pale in the way brown skin goes pale when the blood moves. He reached for my elbow and then didn't touch me. "Sir," he said again softer. "Please, Annika," I said, as if she were a reason to ignore all the signs. He shook his head hard. "No, Annika," he said. He swallowed. "Sir, please." He glanced at the watertight door like you glance at a sleeping dog. "It's closing." I stepped away in time for a panel to drop somewhere above with a hydraulic. Sigh. The open door settled a centimeter and the sound changed. A bass note in your bones, the way a subway sounds layered under your feet. The steward breathed again. He didn't pull me. He walked me by, talking. "Follow me. I bring you out. It is dangerous here. You can hurt." I looked back down the corridor where Annika had gone. For a second I saw her again. Not the green-eyed girl with the perfect posture, but a figure through glass moving underwater, her hair flowing, her tray balanced perfectly flat. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was walking past, on her own route, a track no one else used. The steward touched the wall with his fingers like he was counting his steps. He put me out a door that made my ears pop like a plane landing. We were in a stairwell I recognized. When we came into the hallway, Claire was there, angry in that terrified way that skips straight past words. Ben hovered behind her, guilty because he had been the one to bring us down. The steward said something, in Tagalog that I recognize now as a prayer. He met my eyes once and it felt like he was trying to tell me to be smart, to take the out I was being given. We went back to the wake because we were idiots. I think if I had gone to bed then, I would have slept through the rest of the weirdness and come home and told this as a quirky thing that happened once. But we sat back down. The band started a new set. The wake outside the window glowed its endless road. The room felt like it was breathing slow with the hull. Annika came. Of course she did. She set down 3 waters again like she had a checklist. She had to close. Claire said, "We need to ask you something and you can say no." Annika didn't look like she would say no. Claire said, "Did you put the matchbook in our cabin?" Annika's eyes did the soft change again. "I didn't go to your cabin," she said calmly. "We don't go to guest cabins without a call." Then she leaned a little closer like she was sharing a trick. "If something is in your cabin you don't want, put it outside your door. Housekeeping will take it away." That was the sentence that lodged in me like a fishbone. Not because it was creepy by itself, but because she knew there was something in our cabin we didn't want, and she knew not to name it. "Who are you?" Ben asked in the blunt way he sometimes talks when he's tired. Annika looked at him with an expression I can only call patient. "I bring drinks," she said. The band changed singers. People clapped. A woman in a blue dress tripped on the little step in front of the stage, and 3 men reached to steady her at once. The room made that kind communal sound people make when everyone agrees to be gentle. I reached into my wallet because it felt like something to do, pulled out a 10 for Annika, and with it came the lira note I thought I had put back. It had bled a little in my wallet, the ink soft at the edges. I tried to shove it back before she saw, and of course she saw. She looked down at the note like it was a bird that had flown back to the wrong house. "I'll take that," she said gently, and she didn't touch it. I put it on the tray and she tilted the tray slightly, and the lira did not slide. I was watching the physics now. I was watching the way the lights reflected in the thin film of moisture on the metal. She walked away and I felt better, which doesn't make sense. I felt like the moment had been returned to normal, like a thread had been woven back into the right pattern. That feeling lasted until the ship rolled and a glass fell off someone's table and it shattered. And 4 people said sorry at once like they were the ones who had dropped it, and I turned to look at the wake outside the window. In the dark water, I saw her reflection at my shoulder. She was behind me, only she wasn't in the room. She was in the glass of the window, walking through a corridor I recognized as the one behind the watertight door. She paused at a junction and looked left and right, and then put her hand to the wall like she was feeling for heat. The reflection warped as the ship rocked and she walked away from me toward the stern where nothing is. "Do you see that?" I asked, too loud, and the conversation at the next table paused like I'd broken some lounge etiquette. Claire saw it. Ben said he didn't, which I believe because denial is a tool as good as any when you're at sea and have nowhere to run. We left the wake early. Back in our cabin, the matchbook that had disappeared was on the desk again, open, 1 match missing. I hadn't taken a match. Claire swore she hadn't. On the inside cover, where there had been that string of digits I couldn't place, there was now something else. The string repeated and then a small arrow drawn in pencil and then the numbers 311. Claire said it looked like a door code, which later made me laugh because then I learned ship doors don't work like that. I put the matchbook outside our door because Annika had told us to. In the morning it was gone, and so was the lira from my wallet. We docked in Barcelona the next day. We walked down Las Ramblas like everyone else on our ship and bought watermelon from a man with a cart, and watched a street performer painted silver pretend to be a statue. On the way back, just before the gangway, a security officer pulled us aside for a random check. It was Martin again. He wasn't unkind. He asked if everything was all right. I said everything was fine because it felt like the wrong place to bring up ghosts. He said, "If you find any more items in your cabin you didn't put there, call. Don't move them around." He said it like a second warning in the same way a parent repeats a rule before the party. That night was our last at sea. The band in the wake did a medley of everything they had done all week like they were closing a book. People were hugging waiters and taking photos with favorite bartenders. We sat in the wake again because it felt like we should end where we'd started. Annika didn't come. We waited 20 minutes and ordered from someone else. The someone else was new to us, dark hair, no smile, eyes that were counting tables. She asked our cabin number for the bill. She asked if we wanted the auto gratuity removed, which I didn't know you could do. I tipped in cash because I didn't want to sign my name to anything that didn't feel normal. I kept glancing at the service door. I didn't want her to come, and I did. The wake outside the window looked endless in that way the sea does at night, a path and a wall at once. I excused myself to use the bathroom and didn't go to the bathroom. I pushed through the service door like the stupid character in a movie. The corridor was empty. The air was colder. My breath fogged just slightly. I stood there longer than was sensible because I wanted to hear it again. The wrong sound the water made behind the watertight door. It came like it had waited for me. The deep click of some mechanism locking. The whisper of water moving through a space water shouldn't be. I followed it. I put my fingers on that red-lettered door, and they came away wet with something that smelled like metal. I pressed my ear to the seam and heard footsteps not where I was, footsteps that matched the roll of the ship. A rhythm a person develops when their floor is a moving thing. I thought I heard a voice. It might have been air. It might have been the band, too. Rooms away, the voice said something that could have been my name. "Alex?" Claire said behind me, real and warm and angry, and the spell broke in the most practical way. She grabbed my sleeve and said, "We're supposed to put our suitcases out by 11. Come back to the room, please." We walked back the long way. I looked over my shoulder once and saw the steward who had helped me earlier. He stood at the end of the corridor with his hands folded and his head down like he was counting again. He lifted his eyes, met mine, and shook his head once. He didn't move until I was through the door. We slept badly. Every creak sounded like someone setting down a tray. Every slosh against the hull sounded like footsteps in water. At 5 in the morning, the ship docked in Spain and the engines changed tone in that way I now know means you're close to land. We pushed our suitcases into the hallway with everyone else's. We ate one last breakfast where the eggs tasted like hotel eggs and the orange juice tasted like sugar. In the crush for the gangway, we lost sight of Ben for a minute and then found him again by the slot machines. He said he wanted to put in one last coin for luck. He didn't win. We walked down the gangway into real air. The sun looked like a new penny. The cruise terminal smelled like plastic and concrete instead of damp carpet. My head felt light. On the bus to the airport, Claire leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "When you tell this story, tell it like we were stupid but not crazy." A week later, back home, I dropped a roll of film at the 1-hour photo and came back after lunch to pick up an envelope thick with prints. There were the photos everyone takes, the ship from the pier, the three of us squinting into sun on the deck, a close-up of a plate of shrimp for some reason. There were 3 shots from the wake. In one, Ben's grin is too big because we were tipsy. In the second, Claire's hair has that glow that only happens under stage lights. In the third, the frame is empty of people but perfectly composed. The table in the foreground, the window with the white wake beyond. On the table are 3 glasses, each with a ring of condensation in a neat oval. On the window, faint as breath, there is a shape that could be a handprint if hands made perfect arcs. In the reflection, if you tip the photo just right, there is the hint of a figure walking away, small and precise, balancing a tray that catches the light like a coin at the bottom of a fountain. I pinned the photo to my fridge for years because it made a good story when people came over. I would say, "We stayed in a lounge served by a woman who didn't exist," and people would laugh in the right places, and then I would show them the matchbook I kept in a drawer, the one with one match missing and a smear of something that might be salt across the cover. I never told them about the lira because that part doesn't sound like anything except me losing money and finding it again. Sometimes I wake up at night to the sound of glasses. Not breaking, just touching. That hollow sound ice makes when it shifts. If I get out of bed and go to the kitchen, there will be a ring of water on the table I know wasn't there before. A neat oval you can't see unless you turn your head and catch the light right. Once, this was 2 years after the cruise, there was a note stuck to my door. Nothing on it but a number and an arrow and 311, and my brain took a moment to recognize it and then a longer moment to refuse to. I threw the note away. The next morning, the trash can smelled like the ocean for no good reason at all. I've tried to look her up. I've tried the way you try anything like this, with forums and search engines and the part of Reddit where people tell stories and other people say pics or it didn't happen. There are posts I wish I hadn't read. Stories from people who say they saw a girl with a tray step through a door that was still closing. A man who says he tipped a waitress named Annika and then found his money folded under his pillow wet as if it had been dunked in the sea. A woman who says she worked in housekeeping on a different ship, and once late she saw another uniform cut through a corridor that wasn't there anymore, and when she told her supervisor, he said, "Do not mention this," in a voice that was not a voice you ignored. Whenever a new cruise makes the news, I click. I check the lounge names like someone checking weather. I have never seen the wake again, not with that name. But every ship has a back bar. Every ship has a stern where the white road stretches into dark. If you ever find yourself there, and a woman with green eyes sets down water on your table without you asking and says, "It's warm down here, you should drink," and you look down and you have not told her your name and she says it anyway. Tip in cash if you like. I think she likes it because it means you are solid enough to be kind. Do not follow her through a door that says it shouldn't be open. Don't try to match the ship's rhythm with your feet. And if you wake in the morning and there's a matchbook on your pillow and a bill you didn't mean to give back in your wallet, put them outside your door and go on pretending you are just another passenger. Not because pretending makes it untrue, but because pretending is how you leave when the ship docks. I still hear her sometimes. Not a voice, not words. The clink of a glass against a tray. The roll of wheels somewhere just out of sight. The sound of someone who knows the path by heart, working a shift that never ends. If I ever see her again, and I hope I don't, and I hope I do, I will do what she asked all along. I will drink my water. I will not forget, and I will not follow. This happened to me in the summer of 2015 on a Baltic cruise my sister talked me into. I was 29, she was 26, and we were both too broke to do anything fancy, which is how we ended up in one of the cheap interior cabins, 2 decks, above the waterline. No window, no natural light. Just beige walls, a bolted dresser, a bathroom the size of a closet, and a carpet that felt like it had been ironed onto concrete. It was our first time on a ship that big. We left Stockholm, hit Helsinki, and were on our way to Tallinn when the weather turned. By the time we were heading back toward Sweden, a storm settled over us like a hand. The first sign it was going to be bad was the barf bags that appeared overnight on the stair rails and by the elevators. The second sign was the elevator screens, switching to a calm, looping video telling passengers to use the stairs due to weather. People laughed about it at lunch, clinking glasses and posting photos of gray waves to Instagram, and then before dinner you saw the same people walking, carefully down the hallway with one hand on the wall, like the hallway might decide to tip if they didn't. At some point an announcement crackled that outdoor decks were closed and to please remain in your cabins if you felt unwell. You know those fake fireplaces some ships have on their big TVs? Our whole deck had those on the screens. A touch of cozy, I guess, while the world tried to pry the floor out from under you. Our cabin number was 2149. My sister Maya claimed the bed by the wall. I had the one closer to the bathroom and the door. The first time we heard the knocking was late the first night of the storm. The ship rolled, the hangers in the closet clicked, and then 3 dull, heavy thuds under the carpet spaced a second apart. It didn't sound like pipes. I've lived in enough old apartments to know what pipes sound like at 2 in the morning. A clatter, a ping, a hollow, echoing ring. This was dense. It felt like someone hit the underside of a table with their fist. "Did you hear that?" Maya said, sitting up, hair squashed to one side. I said yeah and swung my feet to the floor. The carpet was cold, which I expected. What I didn't expect was the vibration. Not just the ship's steady hum, but a short, blunt tremor that traveled through the floor into my heels right as the next thud landed. 3 more, then silence. Then 3 again. "Knock back," Maya said, half joking, and then did it herself, rapping her knuckles on the floorboards under the carpet. I was about to tell her it was probably some bracket in the frame or whatever, when the ship rolled and the knocks hit again, answering her beats exactly. She looked at me and smiled in a way that wasn't really a smile. We gave it 5 minutes. Then we called guest services. The woman who answered sounded like she'd been handed a script for this exact call. "We're experiencing unusual motion," she said. "We're advising guests to remain in their cabins. The noise you're hearing is likely loose plumbing. Engineers are working to secure all fixtures." "Under the floor?" I said. "Yes," she said without missing a beat. "Under the floor. It carries through the hull." We hung up. The ship yawed, creaked, and settled. The knocking stopped for a while, replaced by the always-there whir of the ventilation. We slept. The next day, the storm didn't pass. It changed its mind about what kind of storm it wanted to be. The waves weren't taller, but they were closer, more irregular. Everything had weight to it. The buffet had those rubber mesh placemats so the plates wouldn't slide, and you could hear them squeaking as the ship leaned and corrected. I noticed more crew on our deck than usual. Housekeeping went by in pairs instead of alone, and a guy in a blue coverall I hadn't seen before, engineering on his chest, stopped at the end of the hall with a ring of keys and worked on a door that looked like a wall panel until it opened a few inches. He slid something through. A sensor? I don't know. He saw me watching and nodded like, "We've got it," which only made me realize there was an it. We weren't the only ones who'd heard the knocking. At breakfast, I ended up next to an older British couple, Rowan and Jess, who were trying to laugh it off with the waiter. "We kept thinking someone was trying to wake us from below," Jess said, pouring sugar into her coffee, "like we were sleeping on someone's ceiling." The waiter smiled politely and said he'd let the engineers know. When he walked away, he tucked a stack of barf bags into the pocket of his vest. By afternoon, it was worse. The ship did that weird, prolonged tilt where you feel your stomach trying to decide if it belongs to you. People were staying in their rooms or gathering where there were railings to hold. Maya and I went to the theater because the seats were bolted down. Every few minutes, the stage curtain swung a little like something was breathing on it. You could hear a faint tapping even in there, like there was a giant underneath the stage knocking up with a finger to get attention. We both looked down between our feet at the same time. We didn't stay long. We said we had motion sickness and ducked back to deck 2. The hallway outside 2149 smelled like wet carpet and something faintly metallic. Not blood, don't go there. More like when you set your hands on a cold iron railing and then lick your lips. There was a narrow, damp path in the carpet along the wall where crew had wheeled a cart. I could smell bleach too, the hotel kind, clean to the point of not smelling like anything found in nature. 3 knocks, right under my toes. Maya jumped. I crouched, really listening. The ship groaned. People talked behind their doors, that muffled hallway sound. And then behind the knocks I heard it, a soft, breathy thing like a voice under a blanket, like words that never made it out all the way. It wasn't clear. It wasn't English. It didn't sound like anything staged, either. It sounded like someone trying to say something with their mouth full of water. I'm aware how dramatic that sounds. I wish it had been a pipe. Maya got down on her stomach. "Don't," I said. She pressed her ear to the carpet anyway. Her eyes went wide. She sat up fast and her voice did that tight whisper shout. "There's someone down there, I swear to God, I heard." She didn't finish because there was a knock so hard it jolted my kneecap. We weren't the only ones in the hall now. Doors were opening. A dad with a toddler on his hip stood in his doorway, frowning. A young woman I'd seen by the pool on our first day came out wrapped in a blanket. The British couple appeared from their cabin across the hall, Jess with a hairbrush still in her hand. "You hear it too?" Rowan said. Before I could answer, a housekeeper hustled up, the kind who always made our beds with the corners squared. Her name tag said Ilona. She put her hands up, palms out. "Please, please, back to cabins," she said in a thick accent. She wasn't angry, but she looked spooked and determined in equal measure. "Engineers working. We not supposed to be. In corridor. It sounds like someone's, banging," Rowan said, knocking his fist against the wall to show he understood how fists worked. "Are you sure everything's okay?" Ilona's smile was strained. "Everything okay?" She glanced at the panel the man in coveralls had been at. "Ballast, many noises in storm." "What's ballast?" the pool woman asked. "Water tanks," I said automatically. "For balance." "Yes," Ilona said quickly, grateful. "Rocks, water, for balance." She shooed us gently. "Go rest. Close door. We call if problem." We went into our cabin, obediently, because that's what you do when someone in a uniform tells you to. The door clicked shut. The room felt smaller than it had an hour before. The fake fireplace on the TV flickered and looped and looped. We tried to nap. The knocks came and went like whoever was under us got tired and then tried again. Around 5, the PA chimed and a calm man's voice said, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Due to weather, some public areas will be temporarily closed. Our engineering team is inspecting all lower deck spaces to ensure your comfort and safety. Please follow crew instructions, and we thank you for your understanding." It was so routine that it only made my skin crawl more. No one gets on a microphone like that unless they already did the other things. Went down there, looked, decided what they wanted to say about it. Maya had her phone out recording. When the knocks came back, she held the microphone to the floor. She asked, out loud, and I felt ridiculous, "Is someone there?" Then she knocked 3 times with her knuckles. We waited. It was quiet, long enough that I was about to make a joke just to make the room feel normal again. Then, 3 knocks that matched her rhythm exactly, slightly delayed, like they'd traveled through something thick. It could still be coincidence, I told myself. Boats knock and groan with repetition, but when Maya said, "If you can understand me, knock once," and we got one single bang so hard it rattled the drawer handles, I didn't have anything to tell myself after that. We both sat with our backs to the wall. Maya's hands shook. She scrolled frantically for a Morse code chart. SOS is 3 short, 3 long, 3 short, she muttered, and knocked it out like a Girl Scout. Short, 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 long, 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 short, short, short. We held our breath. The ship tilted. The lights dipped and brightened. In the pause between creaks, we heard, short, short, short. A long pause, and then 2 long knocks we felt more than heard, like the floor was taking a slow breath. Then 3, no 4 rapid hits like someone lost the pattern. "You're freaking me out," I said, but I was whispering like we were whispering in a church without meaning to. A second later, a new sound. Not a knock, but a drag. Something moved under us. It scraped against the underside of our floor for a long curved foot, and the scrape had grit in it like sand or rust or scale. It tracked from the foot of my bed to the door, paused, and then scraped back. Slower, as if it took effort. We bailed. I opened our door right into the corridor and almost collided with the guy in the coveralls. Up close I could read his name, Soren. His hair was plastered damp with sweat at the edges. Behind him, 2 other men in matching coveralls stood by. That panel, which was open now in a way that made my brain insist it was still closed. Like a magic trick, except the trick was a black rectangle in the wall giving off cold air and a smell like low tide. "You need to go to your room," Soren said, but softer than Ilona. He didn't sound scolding. He sounded tired. "What's under there?" I said. I wanted him to say pipes like the script said. I wanted him to say it so cleanly that I'd be able to laugh about all this later. "Tank," he said. "Air pocket. When ship rolls, air moves, makes sound." He half smiled like he knew how that sounded. "All safe." "Someone answered me," Maya said. Her voice wobbled. "I don't care about pipes. Someone knocked back exactly when I did. It's recorded. I can play it." Soren's eyes flicked to the open dark square. He kept his smile on, but something in his face. Gone. Then it was back. "Sometimes sound echoes," he said. "Sounds like conversation. Like you talk to yourself. You know?" He backed toward the panel as he spoke. One of the men with him shifted a cart between us and the opening. I caught a glimpse past his shoulder, a steep metal ladder, slick with something, going down into shadow. It was only a glimpse. The cart blocked my view. The smell off it wasn't bleach. It was sweet and stale and stuck in my throat. "Food waste," my brain offered. "Not rot, not bodies, stop it." The ship rolled. Somewhere below us, something tapped, twice, far away. Soren's jaw flexed. He said, "Please go in. Close door," in a voice that didn't leave room for argument. We did. He closed it for us. Maya stood with her ear pressed to the door like a kid. I sat back down on the bed and put my hands flat on the mattress. Hard to explain, but I felt the ship's hum differently now. Before it had been a steady animal purr, something I stopped noticing after the first day. Now I could feel every change in tone. A low, hollow throb as we climbed a wave. A brief lift as we crested. A shiver as we dropped. The cabin light ticked once off and on like a breath held and released. The knock started again, traveling like a person pacing under the floor, pausing under the door, coming back. Around. 8, the PA chimed again. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be pausing our itinerary briefly to complete a technical inspection. Please remain in your staterooms or designated public areas. Our crew will be delivering complimentary refreshments. If you want to know how to make a whole deck hold its breath at the same time, tell them everything is normal and here comes free juice. The floor quieted. The ship slowed. You could feel the stopped motion as a different kind of movement. The, absence of push. The knocking stopped at the exact moment the engines went to that low idle. Then there was a clank like a heavy door opening far below us, and a series of muted thumps, as if carts were being rolled across a metal floor. Maya looked at me, eyes wet. I shook my head, not at her, at the thought forming between us. Outside our door, footsteps. 2 crew, then more, then many. The cart squeaked. The sweet stale smell got stronger, then less, as if whatever it came from was moved further away. Behind it, almost lost under the movement, a sound like breath through teeth. Not a person's breath. Not mechanical either. Long and slow and timed to nothing I could predict. The housekeeper's voice somewhere, speaking quietly in a language I didn't know. A man answered in the same language and coughed a laugh that wasn't about anything funny. From the open panel came a single deep knock, then another from further down the corridor. Impossible unless the underfloor space stretched under everything and connected like an empty lung. And then nothing, not a slow fade. A cut. The ship went still in the way a big thing can go still. There was no absolute silence, but the permission for sound seemed to be revoked. The fake fireplace on the TV, which we hadn't turned off, flickered stupidly. Maya and I sat without talking for a long time. We both tried to say a few sentences and stopped at the same place. What would saying any of it do? We weren't going. To march to the front desk and demand to look into a ballast tank, like a pair of toddlers asking about a monster under their bed. The door remained shut. The hall was quiet, which I wouldn't have believed was possible on a full ship in a storm. At some point we must have slept. I don't remember choosing it. I remember waking up all at once like a switch. The cabin clock said 2:43 a.m. The floor was warm under my feet, which was new. I stood there, waiting, because I wanted to know if I'd only imagined the warmth. It wasn't much, but it felt less like whatever was under us was cold metal and more like it had been busy very recently. I stood there until my skin adjusted, and I couldn't tell if it was warmer or if my feet had just ceased to complain. When morning finally came, the storm had apparently decided we weren't worth its time anymore. The elevators were on again. The barf bags on the rails were gone. The ship made cheerful morning announcements about bingo and the art auction, and people poured onto the buffet like last night hadn't happened. I waited for the knocking, almost missing it, the way you miss a machine you've tuned out. It didn't come. We told ourselves we'd imagined the voice. We told ourselves the pattern was coincidence. At breakfast, we looked for Soren among the crew and didn't see him. We saw Ilona, who looked like she'd slept 3 hours and then bounced up on nerves alone. When she saw us, she raised a hand and then glanced away, the way you look away from someone who saw you cry. Rowan and Jess waved us over to their table. Jess had her phone out too. Without preamble, she slid it across to me and hit play. Her recording was worse quality than ours, and you could hear her whispering to Rowan, not to talk, you'd mess it up. And then, faint, you could hear 3 clean knocks, a long pause, and the steady throb of the ship. She'd written a note below it. Morse, SOS. I played ours for them. We all sat with our 4 coffees and our 2 devices and our dumb little note pinned to reality, and none of us could chisel loose the explanation that would let it go. Did you hear anything after? Jess asked. I told her about the dragging. Maya added very quietly about the breath sound. Rowan stirred his coffee until it went cold. I used to work on ferries, he said finally. Nothing this size. Knocks, yeah, loads of knocks, but that... He waggled his phone in the air. You don't get a voice. I didn't realize until we got home that the ship had never mentioned the storm afterward, not in the way they usually turn everything into a cute story. They didn't joke about the barf bags or hand out little "I survived the Baltic" pins. The crew didn't tell those performative, "Whoa, that was a big one" anecdotes. It was like the whole thing had been a chore they were relieved to have completed, not an adventure we all went through together. A week after we got back, we compared recordings on my laptop. If you turned the volume way up, you could hear a single breathy syllable after one of Maya's questions. She kept replaying it. "It's Apua," she said at one point like a spell. "It could be Apua. That's Finnish for help." We looked it up. She was right, or she wasn't. If I wanted it to be help in Estonian, which is abi, I could hear that too. If I wanted it to be nothing, it was nothing. There are a few things I haven't said because I don't know if they matter or if they're part of the way a story turns into a shape that can be told. 1. There was a thin crack in the floor by the bathroom door where the carpet didn't quite meet the metal threshold. On the morning after the storm, there was dried salt in that crack, like the line of a high tide. Maya noticed it first, ran her finger along it and tasted it because she's that person. "Salt," she said, wrinkling her nose. We'd been in a ship at sea for days. Of course there's salt, but I hadn't seen it there before. 2. In the middle of the night between the announcement about the inspection and my 2:43 a.m. wake-up, I dreamed I was on the theater stage, looking into the audience, and all the seats were full of people whose faces were covered by wet cloth. It doesn't count. It was a dream. But Maya told me a week later, she'd dreamed she was trying to open a door that kept swelling shut with water on the other side. 3. There were 2 cabins on our deck whose doors got a little yellow notice slid under them the morning after. I watched Ilona do it. I asked her dumbly if it was about the storm. "Wellness check," she said, and moved on. The couples in those rooms showed up at lunch. They were fine. I'm only telling you because when the story doesn't have clean edges, your brain tries to cut some. A year later, I was on a plane that hit bad turbulence. You know that judder in your teeth? I felt it through the floor and every cell in my body braced for 3 knocks. None came, obviously. When I got to the hotel that night, I put my ear to the carpet for a second just to get it out of me. Nothing there. Different carpet, different building, different world. But I still got up and put my shoes on the nightstand, not the floor. Maya doesn't like it when I say we weren't the only ones who heard it. She thinks it makes it sound like a horror movie, and what happened to us didn't feel like a movie. It felt like the part where you realize the world has layers you don't know about, and some of them press against you when you're not invited. We never reported anything officially. We didn't demand a refund or threaten a review. We told the story to a few friends and left out the part about the voice because when you say, "I heard someone under the floor" out loud, you can see people politely deciding how to file you in their minds. Every once in a while, when the house is quiet, I'll put on headphones and play those 30 seconds of audio Maya recorded. I try to hear the ship instead of the knocks, the pumps cycling, the ballast sloshing, the hull flexing against pressure. I remember Soren's face when Maya said she could play it back. That brief, unguarded flicker. I wonder if there's a training module for that, if they get a line in a manual somewhere like, "In rough seas, you may hear what sounds like voices. Encourage guests to return to their rooms." The last thing, and then I'm done, is small. On our second day, the day before the storm, I lost my silver ring. It wasn't expensive. It went missing in the cabin. I searched the bathroom, shook the sheets, checked under the beds. Nothing. I figured it got kicked under the dresser into whatever dead spaceships use to swallow things. I forgot about it until 6 months later, when I was pulling a winter jacket out of the back of my closet and it fell from the sleeve into my shoe. I don't have a good reason that should bother me. We'd packed in a hurry. It could have snagged in the lining. I keep the ring in a drawer now. Sometimes I take it out and it smells like my old jackets. Sometimes I swear it smells like the inside of a dock. If you've been on a cruise, you know the sounds. Chairs scraping, kids running, doors banging, the endless hush of conditioned air. After the storm, our ship had those sounds. But there was a period that morning when we left our cabin for the first time, and the hallway was empty. and the engines were threading back up to their usual hum. And the carpet was dry, and I swear to you, it felt like the ship itself was letting out a long, contented sigh. The British couple waved to us across the buffet. Ilona pushed her cart past with her eyes on the floor. Somewhere below our feet, beyond all the doors we weren't allowed to open, the knocking had finally stopped. And in that quiet that followed, the whole ship seemed, there's no other word for it, satisfied, like something that had been trying to get our attention didn't need to anymore. We never heard it again. That should be the good part. But sometimes a silence is worse, especially when it comes right after a sound that only makes sense if you pretend it was asking for food, and someone, somewhere, decided to be kind, or practical, or both. I don't know which is scarier. I'm probably not supposed to be telling this, and I'm definitely not using anyone's real name. I left the company a few months ago, and I still wake up to the thought of rope sliding through metal and that hollow clunk lifeboat hooks make when they settle. If you've never been on a ship at night, the Gulf of Mexico looks like a black parking lot with no lines, just wind, salt, and a sky that's too big. You get used to the noise of it until something breaks the pattern. That's what this is about. A break in the pattern that wouldn't stop. I was junior security on a mid-sized liner, one of those ships that does the same loop out of Galveston and back. Cozumel, Progreso, maybe a day at sea if the weather plays nice. We were in the second week of a 2-and-2 contract. My shift was the evening to early morning block, which meant I handled a lot of bar drama, curfew reminders, and the random "Sir, I think there's a drone following the ship" reports that turned out to be birds. I liked the quiet hours after midnight. Crew life has a rhythm, and if you show up where you're supposed to, people treat you like furniture, which is perfect for someone like me. You learn boats by numbers because names get sentimental and you can't afford that. Odd numbers starboard, even port. Boat 9 was starboard, midship. It sat in orange fiberglass as wide as a van and almost as long as a city bus, with a canvas canopy that stayed rolled tight unless we were doing the full show. Fresh paint, soulless approval, swing-out davits, and 100 checklists that all start to sound like prayers when you say them enough. If you want to know how much trust you put in a cable, watch a lifeboat hang over black water on 2 fall lines as thick as your thumb. Every time, it feels wrong until it's right. This happened on a Thursday. The schedule said, nighttime fire drill 2300. Not for the guests. No one wants to put paying customers in vests after the late show, but for crew. We muster, we count, we check, we pretend. The drill team blow their whistles. The galley. Lads curse quietly and housekeeping does laps like it's a 10K. It's mechanical. Every time I would end up on starboard promenade, walking the line of boats with the bosun, ticking boxes, shining my light into the cradles, making sure the gripes and safety pins were where they should be. The air smelled like warm paint and hot salt. We moved down the line, calling numbers into the radio. Boat 3 secure. Boat 5 secure. Boat 7 secure. When we got to 9, it was wrong. Even before we turned the corner, I felt that weird pressure you get in your ears when an elevator starts moving. Boat 9 was hanging halfway down her davits, swaying a little like a swing someone just jumped off. The gripes were unhooked, the limit switch light was amber, and the falls were threaded and warm like they'd just paid out. Everyone said the same thing at once. Who lowered it? Whose idea was this? Which trainee is trying to impress the chief? The bosun, call him Sosa, swore under his breath, then switched to Spanish and swore louder. Who signed for 9? He asked the radio. No one answered. Sosa and a deckhand, Marta, got to the hand crank, and I took the far end with a flashlight. The orange hull creaked and gave that damp, cold smell of rubber and rope. We winched her back up hand over hand, and when the hooks bit the fall blocks and the safeties were back on, Sosa climbed the ladder to check inside. Water, he said. His voice was flat. There's water in the footwell. That happens, sometimes if it rains or if there's spray. But it hadn't rained, and the sea was calm enough that you barely felt it underfoot. You can tell Gulf salt water from hose water by the grit smell, and that's what it was. There were footprints too, which I didn't want to say until someone else did. Bare prints, heel and ball and toes, going forward to the bow bench, turning like whoever made them had leaned over. They were drying fast in the warm night air, little white chalky outlines on orange gel coat. "Okay," Sosa said. "This is a joke." Except he didn't sound like he thought it was. We checked the drill roster. Every station leader swears. They sign. 9 was blank. Sosa wanted faces, so I went down to the security office where the camera feeds live. The lifeboat platforms have cameras, more for stray cigarette enforcement than anything else. But they catch the boats. I rolled back the feed for the last hour and dragged the slider slowly with my finger. You've probably scrubbed a video like that. The movement is jerky and a little ghost-like. At 22:49, the drill started. Crew walked by in lines. At 22:56, Boat 9's gripes were clipped. At 23:03, the brakes on the davit turned a fraction. At 23:05, the lifeboat started to lower. No one at the control. The winch drum was there in frame, and the manual hand crank was hanging with no one touching it. You could see the falls paying out rope by rope in little bites. The boat dropped, paused in this patient way until it was halfway to the water. Then it stopped. No one moved in or out of the frame. At 23:12, the boat swayed. You could see a flash of water at the bow, like spray. Then one of the ropes shivered. Just a tremor that traveled up the tension to the davit head. At 23:15, the boat started to rise before anyone arrived, and by the time we came into frame, it was already coming back up. I saved it and showed Sosa. He watched it twice, and then once more. He wiped his hands on his coveralls and said, "We're reporting the winch." We did the paperwork. We said possible slipped brake on the form because that's clean. Mechanical stuff breaks. The night carried on, and the gym closed and the bars quieted down. And I did my rounds with the same static hum in my ears I always had on night shift. The air conditioning units thrum, the hull sings a little, the ship talks to itself. And then the radio crackled in my ear. Security, starboard promenade, midship. Motion sensor triggered. We've got little sensors meant to catch crew who sneak smokes and guests who ignore limits. The starboard midship zone includes Boat 9. I went with Marta while Sosa went to get the electrician. There was no one there. The motion light above the boat platform was on, throwing hard shadows across orange paint. I walked to the rail and looked down. Nothing but black water catching a bit of moon. That was the first night. It would be easier if it all happened at once, but it didn't. It stretched out over a few days like a thread pulled out of a sweater. On Friday, word had spread. Crew always know before management. You'd think the casino dealers and the laundry guys never talk, but they do. At the smoking bench behind the crew mess and in the elevator that sticks between E and F deck if the load's too heavy, people started calling it the last boat. Someone said 9 was the one we used the last time we had to launch for real. That was before my contract. A Filipino steward, Mark, told me about a night near Yucatan when they picked up a fisherman who'd been adrift on a cooler. He said the boat brought back one man who wouldn't stop asking for the count. "How many souls on board?" is how Mark phrased it. He swore that's the maritime ghost check. Then he laughed like he'd made a joke that didn't land and ordered a second coffee. Friday afternoon, the chief mate put a lockout on the davit control for 9. Tape across the hand crank, tag on the switch, pictures taken with a company phone. At sunset, I walked past and looked at the plate with the serial number like that would help. My radio hissed again. It kept doing that, a sharp noise that sounded like someone tapping the mic twice with a nail. "Stop keying," Sosa told me. I wasn't. When I lifted the radio to my mouth to answer, the screen on it was fogged, like it had been out in humidity. The rest of the hall was dry and cool. The patch of deck by Boat 9 felt colder than the air a foot away, and I know that. Sounds like I'm making it poetic, but I put my hand out and felt it. A drop, like standing next to a supermarket freezer. That night, a guest on deck 10 called to say there was someone in a lifeboat. She'd been looking down, enjoying the breeze after the karaoke crowd went to bed, and she swore she saw one of the orange boats swing out just a fraction and sway, as if someone had leaned over the side and spit. Cameras showed nothing. Still, The casino guy brought it up when he came down for his midnight smoke. "You hear about 9?" he asked the laundry crew like it was already a legend. Everyone shrugged like they didn't want to be the first to tell it. By Saturday, the feed started to glitch. The camera over 9 would drop frames while the others were fine. It's old tech and I didn't go straight to weird, but it was the same kind of missing, like words swallowed in a sentence. In between those gaps, the boat was always a hair different, more slack in the fall on one side, the bow line hanging at a new angle, a shadow where no one stood. Sosa and I did a closer look that afternoon, midday when the sun was bright enough to put brittle edges on everything. We opened the canopy and checked the release gear. The offload lever was stiff like it should be. The painter line, what ties the boat to the ship before you move away, was coiled neatly, nothing frayed. There was a white ring of salt on the till floor where yesterday's water had dried. "Did you hose it?" Sosa asked the deck team. They said no. He knelt on the bench and frowned at the floor. He touched something and rubbed it between his fingers. "Salt," he said, and then looked at the little scuffs leading up to the bow again. If you squinted, you could convince yourself you saw a newer outline. Maybe the prints had been refreshed, and maybe I was letting my brain make faces in clouds. That evening, the muster alarm was silent for once, and I thought maybe we'd get a normal night. Around 1 in the morning, the call came from the bridge, a light in the water off starboard. "We have to check those." A lantern could be a fisherman. A reflection could be trash, but a light is a light. The bridge launched the spot beams, and white cones swept the water. I was on the starboard promenade already. A couple from New Jersey had slipped out past the sign for crew only, and were arguing in whispers about whether you're allowed to be there. I told them to go back, pointed to the sign, and waited until they did. When they were gone, the deck felt empty in a way I don't like. I saw it then. Not a boat, not a flare, something low to the water, maybe a plastic bottle catching the moonlight or maybe a jellyfish bell. It moved like it had a mind. It drew a line toward the hull and stopped at the distance where a painter line would tighten if you weren't careful. Then it sank. I still had the spot beams bleaching out the surface and I couldn't see anything there, just the wake the ship pushed off like a shrug. "Bridge, starboard midship," I said into my radio. "No contacts." "Copy," the officer said, bored. The ship hummed. The wind felt like it blew through me instead of around me. Sunday night is when it tilted into something I'd call a story. We were sailing back toward Galveston. The swell was easy. The night tasted like zinc and sugar, metal from the rails and frosting from the midnight buffet mixing strangely on the air. I got called to the security office because the bridge wanted someone to sit on the lifeboat feeds. "It's probably nothing," the first officer said, not looking at me. "We're just being thorough." The chief mate was with him, arms folded, staring at the monitors. There were 4 screens showing 4 angles of the starboard promenade. We watched the empty frame of Boat 9 for a long time. The ship's camera, time code clicked over. The air handler buzzed overhead, and that stupid coffee machine that always burned the pot added its own tiny hiss. Somewhere downstairs, someone rolled a trolley with wobbly wheels. At 0031, the motion sensor blinked. The light over 9 came on, no one on the screen. A second later, the limit switch light on the David arm flipped from green to amber by itself. In the same breath, the winch drum moved a quarter turn the way a person might test something before committing. The first officer leaned closer. No one was touching the hand crank. There wasn't a hand to touch anything. "Go," he said, and I was already running. I met Marta halfway, and both of us were doing that quiet jog that crew do when we don't want guests to panic. The hallway had that cold patch thing again. When we stepped onto the platform by 9, I could hear it. Rope slipping, a soft rub like a cat exhaling. The lifeboat had already inched down 6 inches from its cradle, both falls taking weight. I put my hand on the fall line without thinking, and it burned me. Not hot enough to blister, but warm enough to prove it had moved. "Lockout," Marta said. She pointed at the red tag the chief mate had put. It was still looped through the control lever. We both looked at the manual brake and then at each other. The boat lowered another inch. "Call Sosa," I said. My voice came out tight. She did. I stepped onto the little ladder to look into the boat. The canopy was open. The floor looked clean at first glance, just scuffed fiberglass and that ring of salt. Then I saw the new marks, fresher, still damp, around the edges. 2 prints facing forward, another print a little farther, toes pointed toward the bow. I heard a thump under me, not from the ship, not from the machinery. A hollow knock, like a fist under a table. "Don't," Marta said, and I hadn't even moved. We both listened. Another knock came, slower this time, then a third. 3 steady beats. I counted them without meaning to. 1, 2, 3. Sosa arrived with the electrician and then the chief mate, and suddenly there were too many bodies in that tight space, and yet it didn't feel crowded. The electrician went straight to the panel. "Power's off," he said. He sounded insulted, like the equipment had betrayed him. Sosa put both hands on the manual brake release and held it like you might hold someone's wrist in a fight. The chief mate watched the falls, his eyes on the tiny shifting of the strands as if they'd confess. The boat lowered again. Maybe. Another inch or two, not smooth, like it was being done by someone pulling and resting, pulling and resting. The fall lines creaked. Rope does that when it's under new load. The head of the davit ticked like it was cooling, except it wasn't hot. I could feel something like static in my teeth. "Stop," the chief said, but he wasn't talking to anyone in particular. It didn't stop. The painter line, still coiled in the bow, twitched as if something had brushed it. There was no wind in that corner of the deck, but the coil shifted, one loop sliding into another with a soft whisper. Marta put her hand on my forearm. Not hard, just enough to say she was there and maybe to feel that I was there. The radio at my shoulder clicked. It clicked again. Then a voice came through that wasn't on our channel and didn't sound like any of our watch. It was too even, too careful, the way a recording can be even if the words are strange. "How many souls?" it said. Not a question, not a demand. Just those 3 words, flat as if they'd been pressed. Every one of us froze like we'd been told to freeze. The chief mate took the radio off his own shoulder and then put it back like he didn't trust himself to use it. The electrician's mouth made a shape, but nothing came out. A second later, all the radios on all our belts hissed at once and cleared, and the feed sounded normal again. "Security to bridge," I said without taking my eyes off the lifeboat. We have a malfunction at boat 9. I didn't say what I heard. You don't say that kind of thing on an open channel. "Copy. Sending officer," the bridge said. His voice was too calm, like he was performing calmness. The lifeboat stopped lowering like someone had been satisfied. The fall lines held. Then the boat started to swing. Not much, just a tiny arc as if someone had shifted their weight inside, and the hull was correcting. The electric light above us flickered the way cheap bulbs do at the exact moment you don't want them to. In the boat, those damp prints looked darker. For half a breath, I thought I saw a new one appear by the bow. Not stomped down from above, but drawn up from below the surface like a shape pushing through a sheet. It was so faint I might have made it out of the reflection. That's the problem. With things that live on camera screens and wet paint, you can convince yourself of anything. "Winch," Sosa said to the electrician, which was code for do something, even if we both knew that power was cut. "Hand crank," the chief said to us, and that meant manual. I stepped to the crank. Marta took the other handle. We began turning. Everything felt heavier than it should, as if we weren't just lifting fiberglass and safety gear, but something that really didn't want to go. Halfway up, the boat stopped moving. We could feel it in our shoulders, something holding it down from below. Not a mechanical stop. A tug. The painter line slid by itself across the floor of the boat, coil unwinding like a snake waking up. The free end caught the lip and draped over, hanging down into empty air. It swung once, twice, 3 times, and then went still, the tip pointing at the black water like a finger. I had this thought that if we let the painter go, it would hit the water and catch on something that wasn't there. The idea made my chest ache. "Tie that," Sosa said to me, and I climbed into the hull, which felt like stepping into someone's room while they were in the shower. The floor had that tacky dampness that gathers on cold glass. I picked up the painter and set it back into its coil. My palm came away wet. The smell wasn't just salt. It had a faint diesel edge like muttered engines and old rain gear. "Let's get this done," the chief said. And we cranked, and the boat rose the last feet until it touched the cradle and the hooks took. Everything relaxed at once. The air felt ordinary. The radios were dead quiet. The light held steady. The painter lay in its coil like it had always been there. No one said much. We signed a more serious piece of paper. The electrician swore he'd been taught in school that wires do not move by themselves. The chief mate used phrases like anomalous forces and possible misalignment. Sosa put his hand on my shoulder like a father or like a boss who doesn't have the manual for this particular problem. We decided to post a watch. That sounds grand. It meant me with a stool and a half-warm coffee by boat 9 from midnight to 02 Winda. If anyone asked, I was checking for smokers. I sat and listened. The ship patched back into the same hum. On the hour, the bell in the crew corridor somewhere struck through walls like it was underwater. I kept thinking about the radio voice. You hear a lot of voices on ships. People get bored or drunk or lonely and play with channels. But this one had no shape to it. It didn't have country or age. It was just the idea of a voice. Around 01:17, footsteps came up the crew stair. The kind of quick, careful steps of someone who knows this is not for them and is halfway sorry. A young guy in a polo and lanyard, entertainment crew, poked his head around the corner. "Heard the story," he said, eyes bright with fear that feels like a thrill. "Is it true?" I told him no, because sometimes shifting the story is the only control you get. He told me his grandma always said you never ignore the last lifeboat. "It waits for the one who didn't get counted," he said. Then he laughed and tried to take it back as a joke, but it hung there, heavy. Sunday bled into Monday as it always does at sea. The first buses would be waiting at Galveston by morning, and disembarkation day is controlled chaos. If you want to hide a weird thing, a port day is the time. We made it to port with no alarms. Sun up, lines on the dock, gangways out, passengers, trundling bags down to credit card checkout like the last day of summer camp. I stood my post on the gangway and smiled and said goodbye, and kept my eyes up. When we were mostly empty, the shore engineer came aboard, a compact guy with a rolling case who looked more like IT than someone who knows about winches. He did a lot of looking at the davit with his head tilted like a bird. He asked me to play back the footage for him. I pulled up the files. They were there. Timestamps, file sizes, everything. When I opened the Saturday night video, the one with the voice and the lowering, the screen went a flat gray and then showed only a few frames. Me, Marta, a blur of rope. The rest had this tearing look to it, as if the content was there in bits but the player couldn't assemble it. The engineer tapped the screen and shook his head, like that would make it better. "Corrupted," he said. "Happens." He didn't believe what he was saying, and neither did I. Before we cast off for the next loop, Sosa asked for one more drill at 9 during daylight, just for him and his crew. The chief mate agreed as long as he was there to sign it. We did the checklist, like a wedding vow. Gripes off, brake tested, fall lines clear, painter coiled, canopy tied. We lowered the boat down and stopped 2 meters above water like the book says. The hull reflected the sky back at us, blue with a smear of white cloud. Everything looked boring. Sosa nodded and said, "Good." Then he paused. "Wait." Standing, there at the rail, you can see the water run along the hull in thin sheets. It makes a certain sound like someone scrubbing a floor in another room, and in that sound, under the chip of gulls, I heard 3 slow knocks. Faint, deliberate. 1, 2, 3. We were all very quiet. Marta made a cross on her chest without thinking. I stared at the water, at nothing in it, at everything in it, until my eyes stung. We raised the boat, clipped the gripes, and signed the paper. On the form, Sosa wrote, "Satisfactory." Disembarkation finished late because someone couldn't find their passport, like always. By the time I got off my shift, the port was a hot wall of diesel and sunscreen smell. I lay in my bunk and listened to the unexpected silence you get in a docked ship. No more sea hum. Just air units and the distant beep of a forklift moving pallets of lettuce. I closed my eyes and said, out loud to no one, "How many souls?" The words felt like they belonged to a room I wasn't welcome in. I put in for shore leave after the next loop and didn't go back. If you're thinking I left because I'm scared, understand that ship fear isn't like movie fear. It's small and it stacks. It's the fire door that feels damp on the inside when the corridor is dry. It's the list of equipment test times, you know by heart, and the one that happens 5 minutes early. It's the way rope smells wrong for a day and you can't say why. It makes you clumsy, and clumsy gets people hurt. I still have my old deck shoes. There's a white ring on one toe that doesn't wash out. Salt is funny like that. Every now and then I'll be walking past a store and catch the smell of wet nylon and hot paint, and my hand will twitch like it's reaching for a crank. A friend who stayed on sent me a message a few weeks later. He didn't write much because crew don't put things in writing if they can help it. He just said 9 did it again. Then, Bridge says stop telling that story. And finally, drill roster had 1 extra tick mark next to 9, no name. I don't have an ending that makes sense. That's not how ship stories work. Most of the time you never learn what was in the water or if it was just you. I can tell you what I believe and I know how that sounds. But I'm going to say it anyway because it's the only thing that settled my head enough to sleep. The ocean keeps perfect count, better than we do. When we run, when we muster, when we call names and tick boxes and close doors, it listens. If we miss someone on shore, on board, in the space between, it doesn't. It leaves a place. If you ever find yourself on a deck at night and hear rope moving with no hands on it, don't lean over to see what wants you to see it. Don't talk to empty air like it might answer. Just check the roster and count the people near you, then count again. And if your radio clicks like a nail tapping and you hear a voice ask how many souls, say the number you have. Say it twice. Say it like a promise. I didn't see a face, I didn't see a body. That might make this all easier to dismiss. Call it stress, call it groupthink, call it the steep learning curve of a new contract. Call it what you want. But that lifeboat lowered itself rope by rope into a dark sea, and when we pulled it back up, salt water pooled inside and footprints led to the bow where the painter waits. Nobody signed the drill roster for 9. The video showed the boat moving with no one in the frame, the way a breath moves a curtain, and the knocks were as regular as a heartbeat. If you've sailed, you know there are rules, and then there are rules. Don't step onto a moving gangway. Don't turn your back on a line under load. Don't say good luck, say good voyage. And don't ignore the last lifeboat. It's not always for you. Sometimes it's just reminding you that not everyone made it into the count, that the sea doesn't forget, and that the final seat stays open until it's not.